Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to this work session meeting of the Kingman Common Council. Could we have roll call, please?
Mayor Miles?
Here.
Vice Mayor Lingenfelter?
Here.
Councilmember Mello Keener?
Here.
Councilmember Nelson? Here. Councilmember Scott Staley? Present. Councilmember Watkins?
Here.
Councilmember Wade?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Could we stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All work session items are listed for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. The primary purpose of work session meetings is to provide the City Council with the opportunity for in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only as approved by consensus of the Council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or another interested party on an agenda item if invited by the mayor or city manager to do so. The mayor may limit or end the time for such presentations. First topic we'll be discussing tonight is financing public infrastructure through Community Facilities District. City Manager Foggin.
Thank you, Mayor. You're fine, Miss Tina. I'm going to turn it over to you, so you might as well walk up. So what we have for you tonight is an introduction to our the CFD policy, kind of a general overview, as well as a look at what we're going to be proposing as far as a CFD policy moving forward. Of course, this is a policy that's will help us in development of property in what is known as a public-private partnership. And so with that, I've been working very closely with the finance director, Tina Moline, and our FA, our finance advisor, on the development of this. So I'm going to turn the time over to Tina to introduce our speaker. This part of the work session is going to be somewhat lengthy. Apologize up front. There's a lot of information. Of course, we invite questions. If you get lost in what's being presented, please feel free to stop us and ask your questions. There will be a hard copy of the information provided at the end of this meeting. So, Ms. Tina.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as we consider different sorts of financing mechanisms for public infrastructure, community facilities districts are one of those. And so tonight we've asked Mark Reeder, who is a managing director at Stiefel, to educate and inform you on this sort of financing mechanism. We have had a relationship with Stiefel for many, many years, and Mark Reeder has actually worked with various cities throughout this state in forming CFDs, so he is an expert in this area. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Thanks for having me up to Kingman. I'm very glad to be here. We have try not to make it too lengthy for you, but we have a PowerPoint here that we're hoping is very helpful to you. I think, as you know, we were retained by the city. We work for the city, and our job for the city is really kind of twofold. Our job initially is to make sure we educate council on all the complexities and all the intricacies of CFDs, helping you all with the policies and procedures of which you have a draft in your packets. Helping to, structure a financing that makes sense for everybody is our job, working closely in a very collaborative fashion with you all, with your staff, the developers, the property owners. That's a big part of our job once the policies are adopted, is for all of us to get in the room and collaborate and communicate. You'll find that this is will probably be, if you move forward with a CFD, the most complicated financing that you'll probably do in your career. I represent a number of cities, and I'm sure if you talk to others, that would be the case. So we're talking, as Mr. Foggin said, really a pure public-private partnership. We don't have tons of economic development tools in our toolbox, as you all know, relative to assisting with very important economic development projects, and I know this project's very important to the city. So my job, as mentioned, just to summarize, is to help you through all this, to educate you, slow things down, make sure we answer all your questions. My job is to also, at the end of the day, collaboratively work with you and everybody to develop a financing that makes sense to the city, to the developer, to the property owners, and ultimately my job is to go out and find investors who buy these types of bonds. And these investors are very sophisticated. They're generally institutional investors. The CFDs, as we'll talk about this afternoon, these are non-rated transactions because they're early stage development projects. So they're non-rated transaction, they're sophisticated, they have an element of risk to them, obviously, in the early stages. But ultimately, my job is to work with everybody in the room to sell the bonds to investors at reasonable rates and charges. We sell the bonds to the investors, and we deliver the money to the city to assist you with this project. Okay? I know you know that, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little more background on what we do, who we represent, and how we go about doing that process. So as the title here says, Land Secured Finance Study Session, Financing Public Infrastructure on a Tax-Exempt Basis through a Community Facilities District. And as the name implies, and as we're going to get into this evening, a CFD is known as a land secured transaction. What that really means at the end of the day, when we sell bonds to investors, the only collateral we have is the land that benefits from that public infrastructure. This is not a citywide tax, obviously. We are ultimately going to form a district. I got some samples herein around the boundaries that will benefit from the public infrastructure, whether that be 1,000 acres, whether that be 2,000 acres, whether that be 500 acres. I don't think that's been determined. So that's why I like to put this on the front page. It's bonds issued by a city through a brand new living, breathing political subdivision formed by this council that has the powers to issue bonds, okay, very powerful tools to issue bonds, the bonds of which are secured only by the underlying land, okay? So I wanted to kind of just share that with you at the onset. Tax exempt means that we can issue bonds, the interest income of which is exempt from federal and state taxation. So even though they're non-rated transactions, if we put it together correctly, the interest rate on the bonds is pretty attractive because the investors, as you all know, don't have to pay federal and state income taxes. It's a nice benefit for the developer. They benefit from that. It's an off-balance sheet financing for them. They have some liability associated with that we'll get into, but I wanted to kind of just share with you generally the tax-exempt nature, since we are financing public infrastructure, which is a benefit, and the fact that the bonds are totally secured by the underlying land. I'm going to move this along here. So on page 8 here, we kind of talked about what the goals of the study session are. We talked about in number 2 there how they are generally complicated. And the third one I want to focus on real quick because there's two types of bonds that we can issue under state law. There's really 3, but I'm going to focus really on 2 types of bonds that this district could issue. And it depends upon what type of bond, what the request is from the developer. As number 3 says, we have 2 types of bonds that we can issue. One's general obligation bonds, bonds that are issued by the community facilities districts that are repaid by property taxes. Okay? The school district, for example, I'm sure we've all voted for our school bonds. Those are generally the way, by way of example, if a school were to be issued, they have to have a vote of the people. We vote the tax in, and we all pay property taxes to build our schools. And our property taxes is based on 2 things, the value of our home and our property, and the tax rate associated with the amount of debt that goes on the tax base. Fair on that? And so we all pay it based on the value of property. The one distinction here is if I don't pay my property taxes, the debt burden gets shifted over to all the other property taxpayers. Okay, that's a big distinction here we're going to talk about here in a moment. So general obligation bonds, you can't pay them off early. Everybody pays. If somebody doesn't pay, we got to levy the taxes and it gets shifted to everybody else. So there's a degree of risk associated with that, at times. The other bonds that we're going to talk about here that may come into play on an interchange project is special assessment bonds. And special assessment bonds are different because each property owner that benefits from the capital improvements, they get allocated a capital cost allocation based on their benefit associated with that public infrastructure. Does that make sense? So we bring in special assessment engineers, and if we issue $20 million in bonds and we have 5 property owners, we got to break that $20 million up, and we have to allocate X amount to each property owner based on their benefit of the public infrastructure. So we're going to chat about that. If there's 5 property owners and I have an assessment on my land and I don't pay, it's not shifted. Does that make sense? This is a very, very important distinction. A, how the capital costs in assessment bonds are allocated back to each property owner who benefits, and B, they pay the debt service on those bonds, or they make a cash contribution for their amount, and if somebody doesn't pay their assessment in a meltdown scenario, it's not shifted. So I wanted to just get you thinking. I think you know a lot of this, but I wanted to kind of get you thinking as we go through this. And then on the historical role of our firm, I think we've gone through that. On page 6 here, we talked about all of this already. I will say in number 4 that the Community Facilities District statute and how we use it in our state is a pretty powerful economic development tool. It's very beneficial. They work fantastic if they're done right. They aid and assist in economic development projects for not only the developer but the city. And it's a tool that we're using more and more. And I'm probably spending about 30 out of 40 hours of my work week doing them. I do say here that if they're not managed properly, if they're not put together properly in a collaborative fashion, they can be a disaster. And there are some stories out there in which they become a disaster, and we'll make sure that doesn't happen, again, working in a collaborative fashion as best we can. We're talking about policies and procedures this evening. This is very, very important. You all are going to, at some point, whether it be tonight or a subsequent meeting, going to adopt best practices. A lot of the policies and procedures you have in front of you have been used by other cities. That's what we started with lots of hours and study that have gone into them. So we believe that the policies that you have in your council packets and that we'll discuss this evening are all in all pretty good procedures, but yet obviously we're open to your comments and your input. Number down below on page 6 there's really going to be 4 substantive, we got 11 pages I think it is, of the CFD policies and procedures. We apologize for that. But we're going to focus tonight on really 4 substantive policies that are really important in putting together the appropriate transaction for the city and for all parties. We're going to talk about governance. We're going to talk about who the board of directors, there's a couple options here. And we're going to talk about who are generally the board of directors of a living, breathing political subdivision that you all potentially would form. What's appropriate? We're going to go through that. We're going to talk about a little bit about insurance. I'm not going to bore you too much with insurance, but insurance is an issue. Indemnification is an issue. This is where we kind of get into some legal issues. I'm not your attorney. I wish Michael Cafizo, your attorney, was here this evening. He had a family matters you may have heard of, but we'll do our best to answer your questions as it relates to that. Indemnification's a big issue. We're going to talk about development agreements a little bit, and we're going to talk about a CFD development agreement. There's 2 really substantial legal documents that we enter into on a parallel track as we put these transactions together. That'll be very important to your city. And then number 4, we're going to talk about some debt structures that make sense. And we're going to talk about some credit policy, some economic issues associated with your policy so that we do the right thing going forward. Okay? So those are really kind of my introductory comments. I hope I still got your attention, but I'm not sure if I do. Okay. On page 8, you all know this. You have property taxes already in your city. These are all your overlapping property tax, your jurisdictions. The county, the community college, the flood control district, the library district, as you can see there, the Kingman Unified, very common for our school districts to have a pretty, sizable tax rate based on state law primarily and some potential bond issues. So we just put this together for you your overlapping tax rate's $10.58 per $100 of net limited assessed value. So not bad. I would say in the Phoenix area, it's double that generally. And so I think your county has done a good job of keeping your tax rates low, as low as you possibly can. So if you form a CFD, whoever the property owners are, if it's within the boundaries of the city, which I think it is, it will be, they will pay these taxes along with whatever taxes or assessments we put within the boundaries of the CFD. Okay? So we hope that was helpful for you as a reminder. Page 9, really, I like this slide. It's just the typical life cycle of a real estate development project. In your case, the CFD that we might be considering here soon is certainly in the pre-development stage. That's where we're at now. Getting entitlements, figuring out what we're going to do, figuring out what the city's requirements are going to be, entering into development agreements for utilities, roads, things of that nature. And then equity is used and bonds are issued for infrastructure improvements, and then it goes to development, and then ultimately it's built out. These, as you all know, are economically sensitive type projects. They take years to build out. I'm working with Pulte Home in the Phoenix area. They've got a 5,000 acre residential CFD. They're probably 18 years into it, and they have about 2,800 homes built in 18 years, just to kind of give you a flavor. Obviously, we went through the Great Recession. That didn't help. We're hoping that we avoid ever again the Great Recession and the subsequent drops in values and the economic hardships and all that. So I just threw this slide in here because we're early stage relative to your projects, and as you all know, they take a pretty significant period of time, just the nature of development. We've got some case studies in here in hopes that they're helpful to you. This is on page 10 here, a community facilities district that we formed down in Florence. We actually have 2 community facilities districts there. The blue line is about 5,000 acres, large master plan residential community in this case. Not much of a commercial CFD yet, although they think commercial will come eventually. And in the red lines, we formed one there at about 1,100 acres. So those are the boundaries of those 2 CFDs, and the yellow lines are where we carved out certain properties. So as I'll share with you here in a moment, to the extent that we move forward with the CFD, you can pick the landowners that will be within the boundaries of your CFD. And you can see in this case, we had to carve out a couple folks there and the one up on the top. So just to give you kind of an idea on that. Page 11, this is down south of Tucson and Cerrita, very fast growing community south of Tucson, about 15 miles, called Rancho Cerrita. And those are the boundaries of the CFD that we recently formed. Again, this one's going to be being done primarily for residential master plan community and the issuance of general obligation bonds in this case with no special assessment bonds. Page 12 just is a quick reminder of the pace of development, and you can see we just went back and shared with you how fast things were going back in 04, 05, if you remember. It was kind of crazy back then. We were in a false economy, most certainly, and you can see they hit 722 residential homes in 1 year. You can believe that. And then all heck broke loose, and as you can see, they went all the way down to a low of about 117. So just a couple slides in here that kind of took into account the Great Recession. And again, if we do go into recession in the future, we're hoping that it won't be as severe as it was before. So same thing on page 13, just showed, this is another CFD in Marana, shows you the building permits down below, where we're up about 207 to 163 there on the left-hand side. And then when the recession hit, you can see they only did 2 units in one particular year. So just the ebbs and the flows and the dynamics of real estate development that we wanted to share with you on those couple slides. On page 16, this is just a little history of it. They've been around for about 30 years. So we've been doing them here in Arizona about 30 years. I got some slides in here. We've done a couple billion. We've probably done about 300 financings, so we've gotten pretty good at it in the state, and they've been around really now for about 30 years. Most of them are over about 1,000 acres. We have formed some smaller CFDs at around 600 acres, but generally we find, just because of economies of scale, that you'll see these with kind of larger acreages so you can spread that capital cost on the development. The bond issue sizes have ranged from 25,000 to 50 million. And so all over the scale in terms of the size of the transaction at the time that we did them. On page 17, under the state statute, CFDs can finance virtually any type of public infrastructure. It's a very, very, very flexible tool here. So you'll see, we can do streets and roads and landscaping and utilities and flood control, and we've never really been not able to finance the infrastructure that the developer would like to be either acquired or built. Page 18 shows you the number of cities in Arizona that are in the business. You can see we've got really about 20 cities. I'm kind of rounding here. You see a lot of familiar cities here that are all in the business. None in Mojave County have formed a CFD. I represent Bullhead and I represent Havasu. We've had some talks over the years about forming a CFD in those communities, and they just never took place. And then counties, the law was changed not too long ago, about 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Counties could also do a CFD should they desire. The only county that has done one is Pima County. Pinal County is one of my clients, and they're looking at forming 2 of them as we speak. So the tool is out there being discussed with lots of cities and counties. We've got a lot of slides here on formation. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm not really going to go through these because I don't really want to put you to sleep, and it's really kind of a bond council call for you. Your council can form a CFD in one night. They're not that hard to form. The key thing in forming a community facilities district is making sure, at least in my view, is making sure that all the property owners that are within the boundaries of the community facilities district are pretty much on board, especially with assessment bonds. So by way of example, if we get 10 property owners in the room, okay, and we discuss the project that we're going to do, whether it be the interchange or what have you, and we discuss what the capital cost associated with that project is, okay, and all the other financing tools that are going to go into this thing, okay. In your case, as it relates to the interchange, if you proceed with that, there's going to be a number of sources of funds on that project, as you know. ADOT potentially, city potentially, the CFD potentially, and we got to bring all that together at the same time. Does that make sense? So in my experience, when we form these community facilities district, and this gets back to my comment about collaboration, is making sure early on in the process that we're in the room with all the right people, and we're communicating, and we're talking to each property owner, who, by the way, is going to pay property taxes and a special assessment potentially, to make sure they're on board with it and to make sure they're comfortable with the allocation of their capital costs. Because what happens is, if somebody feels as if they're not being treated fairly in that regard, there's going to be some, push-pull going on. You may have some that want out of the district at that point. You may have some that may want to come into the district. So when you read through this, and we'll have Mike Cafizo come up and talk about this, generally, if we can get 100% of the property owners on board up front, recognizing what they're getting into, what it's going to cost them, what they're going to have to pay for on an annual basis, then if we get 100% of the property owners, we can go through what's called a waiver process. And that's where the property owners waive some of their ability to protest certain items as we go through the process of forming the district. So if we could get 100% of the property owners, you can form them much quicker. If we don't get 100% of the property owners, and you want to kind of bring people in, maybe the hard way, if you will, because there is a way to do that, then it's a lot longer of a process to get a particular district formed. So I'm gonna kind of leave it at that, and then we can dig in later a little bit more if you want on that. But generally, that's how most of these CFDs are put together, okay? And probably the proper way, so we're making sure that people are communicating properly. So anyway, the attorney put in like 6 pages there. I just didn't want, I didn't really want to do that to you unless you wanted to. Okay, page 28. This is a slide that Mike put in here regarding the board composition. So, you know, once everything is figured out, all the property owners are happy, everybody's happy, and we bring all the funding sources together, and your city council elects to form a community facilities district on one particular evening. You have really 2 choices here under the state statute. Your city council can be the board of directors of the community facilities district, plus 2 outside board of directors appointed by the developer, the largest landowner. That's relatively new. That was adopted back in 2017 as the developers felt they wanted some say-so, if you will, on the board. So when we form them now, we have a 9-member board, 7 city council members, and 2 outside boards, okay? We just formed one in Avondale about 3 months ago. Avondale elected to be the city council, and they had 2 outside boards of directors. We just formed one 3 months ago or so for the city of Phoenix. The city of Phoenix City Council is on the board, and they have 2 outside board members, okay? The statute also allows, if desired by the city council, to appoint a board of directors 100% outside the city council, okay? So this gets back to the governance of a community facilities district and the best way in which to do that. I would say in Arizona, 95% of the community facilities districts formed around the state by the cities and counties, they elect to have their city council be at the table because they want to have some control and they want to be involved in the project. In your case, since you might have multiple sources of revenue coming together, it would seem to me that would make a lot of sense. Maybe even including the city contributing funds towards a particular project. But the statute does allow you to consider an outside board of directors if that is something that you think would be in the best interest of your community or in this particular district. So I think you were aware of that. I just wanted you to give you a summary of that, and I wanted to give you a summary of what the other cities are generally thinking on that front. There are a few cities who have elected. There's one city in particular that I'm aware of that has elected to go to a full outside board. That's the only one that I'm aware of at the moment. That's down in Vincent. On slide 29, we talked earlier about this tool in the toolbox. This is a tool used around the nation. And you'll see the volume go up when the economy's good, and you'll see the volume of the bonds go down when the economy goes down, obviously. Billions of dollars are issued throughout the country for various types of public infrastructure projects. All in all, we've had some very good history around the country with regard to making sure there's no problems. No city, no investment bank, no city manager, no city council ever wants to live through a municipal bond issue that goes into default. That is your worst nightmare. And so the industry's done a good job, I think, all in all. Arizona's been very lucky on the general obligation bonds and the special assessment bonds issued by our cities and counties over the last 30 years. We've had no major problems. There was a problem with a revenue bond issue. That's why generally you don't see revenue bond issue. It was kind of a one-off way back. But as it relates to the issuance of assessment bonds that we talked about or general obligation bonds, Arizona is highly respected in the industry. Investors believe strongly in Arizona. We've been somewhat criticized by the development community at times. When I say we, I mean cities and towns and counties and some of the professionals involved. But we've taken a conservative posture on this, and we think, all in all, that's been a good thing. I will point out on slide 29 here on the left-hand side, Florida and Colorado are 2 states that allow for the board of directors of their special districts to have outside boards of directors. And if you see here in the Florida one here on the left-hand side, 18% of those bonds went into default. and commonly known down in Florida that they did not put together real strong policies and procedures. They kind of, loosened their underwriting criteria, if you will, their value to lien, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and other matters. And so when the recession hit, especially a significant number of those bonds went into default, and they're paying the price on that now, and they're having to work them out and so forth. So Colorado's had a few problems because they've got some outside boards of directors. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not trying to make any judgment calls here right now, but I do want to share with you that I think it's, generally known that if our city councils and their staff and the appropriate professionals aren't involved, a particular CFD can be vulnerable. And it's happened in the past in Florida and Colorado and probably in a few other states. But in our state, so far, so good, and I wanted to point that out to you. On page 30, we talked about this. We kind of talked about general obligation bonds. I'm not sure if that's going to be relevant in your case that you're considering at the moment. To my knowledge, they're not going to really request that at the moment. I suppose they could. Another developer could come to the city and ask for the issuance of property tax general obligation bonds. We generally see about a $3 tax rate generally out there, from $2.10 to $3.25 for those cities that issue the general obligation bonds. General obligation bonds are approved by the voters. General obligation bonds cannot be paid off. On page 31, and this will probably be a request that comes in under the statute, the city can levy a 30-cent per 100 maintenance and operation tax levy. Okay, outside payment of the bond issues, the developers will come in and we would levy a 30-cent tax rate on all of the taxable property located within the boundaries of the district on an annual basis. And that tax levy then goes into the budget to help administer the operating expenses of the CFD. Does that make sense? So we have a bond tax rate on GOs and we have a secondary tax rate on GOs. So I want to point that out. Probably on the general obligation bonds, what generally happens on that to avoid the risk is the developer will put the infrastructure in the ground. They will make that investment in the early stage, hundreds of millions of dollars in most cases. They will make the investment, and the city, pursuant to the development agreement and the CFD development agreement, will agree to issue bonds in the future once the tax base grows and we have sufficient tax base to issue bonds against, okay? We then issue the bonds, generally, and then we purchase the infrastructure from the developer, or we reimburse the developer for their capital costs, for their initial capital costs. That's called an acquisition district. This will be very important as we work together, depending upon the project. But generally, very common out there for cities to require the developer to make 100% of the equity contribution and then be reimbursed as the project goes vertical. That's called an acquisition bond. We're going to talk about a construction bond here in a moment that may come into play in your particular situation. Okay? So I'm going to kind of limit that. Now, assessment bonds, again, payable from the special assessment. So if I'm a property owner in the boundaries of the Community Facilities District and we do a $10 million project, I'm using that as an example, and I'm allocated $2 million of the $10 million on my parcel of land, okay? That special assessment is a superior lien to all other outside parties that have an equitable interest in that property. Does that make sense? So with the assessment bonds, we have to get under the attorneys require us to get approval from all property owners and all those who have an equitable interest in the property, because the lien is superior in the event of a problem. So just wanted you all to kind of understand that. It's good for us as an issuer, because if we had a default scenario, right, we have a superior lien. We jump ahead of the bank or any other investors, and then it's our job to go ahead and exercise our remedies under foreclosure if there was a problem. So I wanted to share with you on the special assessment bonds, once the bonds are issued, the lien is recorded on all the property owners, and it's a superior lien to any other investor in that project. Okay? We talked about the allocation of the capital cost back to each property owner based on benefit. Remember that? This gets real tricky. And this is where, as I mentioned earlier, we can have some disagreements with property owners, so we got to make sure we manage this very, very clearly. Generally, what happens is the district will hire a special assessment engineer under state statute. The special assessment engineer is required to come to the city council with a recommendation on benefit. So we got to allocate those capital costs back based on something. Might be acreage, it might be distance, might be a trip charge. You guys with me? In Phoenix, we're doing a parking garage, and we have a number of property owners, and there was some, disagreements based on distance. And it becomes very important because it impacts the amount of the capital costs that go to each property owner, which then impacts our value to lien. So as we get into this, we're going to have to be very clear, very communicative with respect to, if we do assessment bonds, how are we going to allocate back the capital cost to each of us to make sure that we're getting a fair shake, and that the allocation is considered fair and equitable under state law. So this is a back and forth between the bond attorney, who has to give an opinion that it's fair and equitable, the assessment engineer, and all the property owners, and come together so that we all think that the capital cost allocations back to our property is fair. Okay, so that's what page 32 is kind of laying out on there. We talked about the assessment lien. They're collected twice a year by the county treasurer, so the county treasurer can collect special assessments just like they do property taxes. Makes it really easy. They'll send out the tax bills twice a year, and the property owner will pay the assessments along with the property taxes on their property every 6 months, like we all do. Okay? On page 32, value to lien. So we're going to talk, in your policies, I think right now we have a 4-to-1 value to lien. This does not come into play with the general obligation bonds, obviously, but as it relates to special assessment bonds, for every dollar of debt that we put on that property, the policy is going to require a 4-to-1 value on that. So if we have $1 million lien, we got to have a $4 million value, right? Because we want sufficient value on the land in the event there's a market turn on that, and we never want the land to be worth less than what the assessment is. So cities will put a cushion in there, generally 4-to-1 best practice. There's wiggle room there if we need to. I was in a meeting yesterday at a city, and they're thinking about doing 6-to-1. They have their own viewpoints on that, but I'll tell you that I think 4-to-1 value to lien's fair. I think ultimately when we go to investors, that's going to be preferred. If we, for various reasons, decide to go to less than 4-to-1, because there's a good story, things are happening, the project's going to the next level of development, there's confidence, the values will rise, and maybe there's some wiggle room to go down to 3-to-1. So just please bear with me on that as we work together. That's going to be a push-pull as we go through this together, and we'll see how things shake out. The value is determined based on an MAI appraisal. So we have to have a really smart appraiser in the room who really understands real estate in Kingman. The property owners will get the benefit of the public infrastructure on the bond issue, so that's a good thing, right? Because they're going to benefit from all that public infrastructure, and the property will be appraised with that infrastructure in place. So that helps us get there. And if for some reason we're not able to get there, that means that the property owner's got to kick some equity into the transaction. That's certainly always an option, depending upon where we stand on our forward. So let's see, what else? On page 33, we just kind of gave you a little more on here, but I think I covered most of it. I covered that special assessment liens are not cross-collateralized. That's why they stand on their own. and I covered that they're senior lien priority. That's why we need to get property owner and investor consent, if you will. And that's generally how the special assessment bonds work. Okay? Let's see here. On page 34, the city of Kingman, we worked with you guys way back when. You guys did a special assessment bond for the Airway Avenue Railroad Crossing ID way back when. And I think that worked out okay. Tina's nodding. I think that worked out okay. And at that time, you went through something very, very similar on all the assessment allocations and assessment engineers and value to lien and all that. This one's a little bit different. It's a city improvement district. This is always an option for you, by the way, on projects. Assessment bonds, in this case, issued by the city of Kingman with appropriate economics and value to lien that we talked about at the time. It was a very important project, as I recall, way back when. I think the value to liens were less than 4-to-1 way back then, but the difference between a city improvement district and a community facilities district vehicle is that the city's general fund stands behind the assessment bonds in the event somebody were to default on their assessment. So our job as an underwriter is very easy when we issue City of Kingman bonds, and because investors know that if there is any problem, the statute requires you to dip into your general fund, pay the bond payment, and then go exercise your remedies under foreclosure, foreclose on the property, and get reimbursed. So these are really nice economic development tools, frankly. I wish we were doing more of these, frankly, in the state with the right degree of measured risk, because we don't want your general fund, obviously, to be at risk on any ID you would do in the future. But I just wanted to kind of share that reminder that you all have kind of been through this process on a traditional ID, not a CFD. Okay? Couple case studies here. If you've been out to Buckeye, this was an assessment bond that I worked on back in 2005. This was a $50 million assessment bond, okay? The city had a 4-to-1 value to lien, so we had to get to $200 million in value on all of the property that was going to benefit from a new wastewater treatment plant expansion and collection line. So in 2005, Buckeye had so much growth, they went into a building moratorium. They ran out of sewer capacity, literally. And it takes a while to build that up, as you know. So the city got together with 18 property owners and 12 home builders. There were 30 people in the room. Back to being collaborative, right? And we said, how are we going to solve this major health and safety and development and economic development issue? And we got in the room, and the city agreed to form a community facilities district. You see all the pattern land there, because it doesn't have to be coterminous. So if you see the patterns there, I don't know if there's all of the property and the patterns you can see. There's 18 different property owners in this case in the patterns. It's not coterminous. All of those developers and landowners came to the city, sat at the table, and we put together a financing to raise $50 million, special assessment bond. It was allocated initially on a per acre basis. Everybody thought at the time that was kind of a fair and equitable allocation of capital costs back to each property owner. And the yellow lines are collection lines to the residential property lines. This is primarily a residential development, okay? We issued $50 million in bonds. It was the largest special assessment bond done in state history. I worked on it, I managed it, I'm very proud of this one. And I don't know if you've been by I-10 and Watson Road lately, but it's an economic boom. And this CFD had a big part to play, I believe, and the city would tell you that this CFD enabled the city to develop major commercial businesses on I-10 and Watson Road as you're heading out to Buckeye. So this has worked out very, very well, very, very complicated, but got it done. The next page, just share this with you. This is some information on the 18 pieces of property on the left-hand side. Those are the property owners. You can see the acres in that each property owner has, and you can see the related capital cost allocations back to each property owner. You go all the way over to the second to the right-hand column, based on an MAI appraisal that we had done at the time, taking into account the benefit that these properties were gonna get by having sewer, because that adds value to your property, right? And they had water, so that was good. They had utilities. They had home builders lined up. They had options from the home builders that when we delivered the sewer, they went ahead and purchased the land and they were gonna go vertical. Okay, you see the value to lien there at 5 to 1, 5 to 1. We had one parcel that was 9.5 to 1, 5 to 1, 5 to 1. The lowest one, I think, looks like it was 4.26 to 1. So the appraisal came back and we met the city's 4 to 1 value to lien, obviously, and we're able to sell the bonds based on this to investors who believed that the area was gonna continue to grow and build out. And we got this thing done in the nick of time and in December of '05, and you guys know what happened in 2006 and 2007. We went into the Great Recession, and I'll tell you that those value to liens, many of which went below 1 to 1. That's how fast, you know, or how, I guess I should say maybe how overvalued things were back then, remember? They called it drive to qualify. And you were getting tract homes at 400 grand, you know, and things were just, it's a false economy. So our values were way up, and then when everything came back to reality, all of this value went down to 1 to 1 and even less than 1 to 1, okay? Now, as the underwriter, did I have some sleepless nights? I did, because it's always our fault, the bond issue goes bad. So the neat thing about it, though, was it was a pretty resilient CFD even through the Great Recession. So what happened is some property owners lost their property. They were unable to make the special assessment payments, okay? So the banks would step in, and the banks, you know, basically felt there was value here, and they continued to make the special assessment payments on our bonds, because I think they saw that as, let's kind of work through this, and as they worked through it, then the value started climbing. And now we're back to, we're actually getting ready to refinance this. I think we're gonna be 4 to 5 to 1 back to the value to lien. So it's kind of the ups and the downs, and I do like to share this because some people say that, you know, that we won't go into a recession, and none of us can predict that. So we gotta have some cushion, whatever that might be. So I wanted to share that with you. Going along here, this is the City of Phoenix CFD we just formed that I kind of shared with you. This is a redevelopment project of Park Central Mall. You guys have probably driven by or been to Park Central Mall. It was one of the first outdoor malls in America, as I understand it. It became dilapidated, and it was purchased by a couple developers. The developers went to the City of Phoenix and asked them to form a CFD and issue special assessment bonds for a parking garage. So we're in the middle of that right now. We're gonna be selling bonds in a couple of months. And again, we had some push-pull on the allocation of the assessments between the assessment engineer and the attorneys and the developer because of proximity to each parcel of land. So that's kind of one lesson learned that we don't want to go through again. So this is a pretty neat project, and it's going to be completely redeveloped. There is a sales tax TPT reimbursement back to the developer as a credit against the assessment. I've chatted with Ron about that and Tina about that a little bit as an economic development tool in your toolbox if that should come into play. In this case, Phoenix gave a pretty substantial TPT on the construction sales tax and ongoing sales tax in this case, since they're going to have a pretty significant amount of retail in this project. Okay? So I guess with that, we've got some best practices here. We've kind of already talked about that. And we've got some information on the development agreement that ultimately you're going to enter into. And a CFD development agreement you're ultimately going to enter into. Key thing on this, and we're going to go through policies later, I'm glad to address this. This was the result of some developers pushing through some changes at the legislature a couple years ago. And what our policy requires, which I think makes a lot of sense, is that before a developer would submit an application for formation to the city, because under the statute, we have to respond in 60 days. That was put into law 2 years ago. What we ask in our policies is for the developer to negotiate the development agreement and the CFD development agreement with the city on a parallel track prior to the submission of an application for your consideration to form the district. Okay, does that make sense? So what was happening was the developers put this in. We only had 60 days. As you all know, 60 days is not a lot of time. So we think that by requiring the developer to get in the room with us quicker to address all the development issues and all of the technical issues, credit issues, all that makes a lot of sense. So I wanted to share that with you. So I think with that, maybe just real quick before I turn this over, in the back are a bunch of case studies. I did want to share with you a case study that we did on a highway acceleration financing with ADOT. Because I know, if you all move forward with an interchange project, it would be nice if they could have some participation in this, obviously. And I know there's some ongoing discussions on that. Yavapai County, Highway 260, when you turn on Camp Verde to head back to Cottonwood, Highway 260, really bad road, really bad highway, lots of fatalities, no money to widen it, over the years. And so they finally did a negotiation, and ADOT had put Highway 260 on their 5-year CIP. And I'm not sure where that stands now, but back when we did this, once a project got on the ADOT 5-year plan, it was, if not 100%, 99% certain that ADOT was gonna follow through. So it was on their plan. The county asked us if we could do an acceleration financing for about $30 million, I think it was, $32.5 million, 2 years in advance of when the ADOT money would come in. So we did a very nice, very creative advancement financing. The county was at risk on that, but not significantly the way we structured it. And we raised $32 million, 2 or 3 years in advance. We wired the money to ADOT. They were in charge of the project in that particular case, and they built the project 3 years early. So there are tools in the toolbox, I think, as you are aware, and I wanted to share this one here with you, and I think there's ways that the city could do it as well. The rest of this stuff is just a bunch of case studies from around the state on all the deals that we've done. We hope it's helpful to you. There's some commercial CFDs in there, some master plan residential communities in there, or case studies in there. So I think with that, Tina, did I miss anything, or Ron? Is there anything that you would like me to address, or Mayor, members of the council? Can I answer any questions? I hope that was helpful.
I think that there aren't any questions at this time, but thank you. That was a lot of great information.
Okay.
I guess I did have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Early in your discussion, you talked about 100% of the landowners, if they agree to a waiver, that a lot of this process can be shortened.
Yeah.
Does that include all the lien holders as well as those who are considered landowners on the property tax assessment?
Yeah, so as I understand it, again, bear with me on the formation stuff, as I understand it, we'd bring all the property owners in, all the property owners would be happy, agreeable, and the property owners have to go to any other lien holders or anybody who has what they call an equitable interest in the land, a bank or an investor. They gotta sign it. Because if they have an investment in the property and there's a lien that goes ahead of theirs, then the courts have said, we gotta get their buy-off on it. So I think that's how that works at the end of the day.
But not any entity that has property tax against it, because that's superior to the CFD?
Property tax against it, you mean just general property taxes, or, yeah, that would be.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
So it's going to be on the tax bill, the property tax bill. There would be a line item on there, and if you fell in that range, then you would have that line item, and it would be a property tax.
Correct.
So if a person didn't pay their property tax bill, they would run together to be the superior lien.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the way that works, general property taxes, you know, the first page, the $10 slide, they've got a superior lien ahead of our assessment bonds. So I think, you know, they get paid first, and then the assessment lien holder, assessment bonds, you know, get paid second, and then the mortgage, whatever's left over, if there was anything left over at the courthouse steps. In a kind of a meltdown foreclosures scenario. Does that make sense? One thing I failed to mention, special assessment bonds are kind of cool because they transfer with the property. So when somebody takes on a special assessment and they ultimately sell the property, then it transfers, okay? You have to value that into the cost of the land, obviously. Or the other, and we also set these up such that if any property owner wants to prepay their assessment, they can do so essentially on any interest payment date without penalty. So we try to make it easy on the property owners because there's going to be a lot of changes going on over time. And they may want that assessment to transfer, the new owner may want to pay it off, things of that nature. So it's a nice little tool to help, you know, with the CFD and its ultimate build out.
Maybe I
Okay, Councilwoman Staley?
So one of the things that I was noticing is you had some properties that chose not to participate in the project, but my question is if their property value is going to be increased, the people who had access now to the new sewer treatment plant, or in this case, when we're talking about Rancho, their property is now accessible where it wasn't before, so we know their values will go up. Can they still choose not to participate, not to pay in, but their values will go up? Because that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, good question. Sorry, I'm a little bit hoarse. So that's a situation where, in that case, that kind of may be unfair, where somebody says, I don't want to be in it. I don't want to be in it, so I'm not going to get that capital cost allocation and let everybody else pay for it.
Right.
So in that case, and if Michael was here, he'd be a better job. You can go ahead and form a district around the boundaries, as I understand it, that you think will benefit from that public infrastructure.
Okay.
And let's say it's 15 property owners, I'm just picking a number. And maybe there's 3 property owners in there who say no. I think there is a way under the statute, and we'll get you some information on this, in which you can form the district, there'll be a protest period, but I still think with enough votes of the property owners, there's a way to have them be included in the district.
Okay, that makes
So,
sense.
yeah, bear with me on that, and again, I wanted Michael to kind of chat about that, but we can get you an answer on that.
Okay.
So I hear you on that.
A quick follow-up to that, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
On page 10, it shows the town of Florence, and then I believe you mentioned that the areas that were highlighted in yellow
Yeah.
fell within, does that relate to the exception you were just talking about? I mean, are those the ones that they just kind of wrote the boundaries around
Yeah.
those individuals and
Yeah.
kind of just, if in fact someone felt that it was fair to do that to certain things. So like, let's say, a district was formed and its intent was commercial and there are small pockets of residential or something like that where they might be exempt or where you wouldn't necessarily want them to be within that district, you could cut those out. Okay.
So on this one, this yellow box up here, up on top, that's some state land.
Okay.
They're having some issues with that. The town is with an in situ copper mine going in. And so the state, you know, we've approached the state on this, to have the state participate in some of the capital cost allocations since they benefit. And, never say never, but they've always, suggested to us that they're not gonna participate in a capital cost allocation that the property benefits from. This property down here, this was formed by Pulte. This was formed by a single landowner back in 03. They were buying 1,000-acre swaths of land back then. That was the Pulte home model. So Pulte formed the district. They were the only landowner. Makes it easier, right? And these yellow lines are commercial properties And in talking to people that buy commercial property, they would prefer not to have a special assessment or a tax because it apparently is a competitive disadvantage to them. So I think Pulte just, in the city, just said, okay, we're gonna carve out, this commercial piece. I wish they wouldn't have, because maybe they do now, because that's really where you get a lot of value, right? You start cranking out commercial, that's where you get a lot of tax value, that 30-cent money goes up. So, yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, and you can carve out, I think, who you want, and maybe bring in some people who may not want to come in, because they will benefit, and go through the protest periods and all that, and make it happen, one way or another.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's
I'll
very,
stick
very
around.
informative.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. Hope that was helpful.
Next item on our agenda is off-ramp and city entrances improvements discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate your sticking with us through that. I know it's
good.
tough treading, but it's really important. For this next section, I know Councilmember Scott Staley had asked for us to talk about our off-ramps and kind of what can be done or what is being done to improve our image with those people that drive in and out of our community. And so in an effort to try to bring you a little bit more up to speed, I kind of see this as kind of a series of conversations. But to get started with, I've invited Jack Plenty to kind of walk the council through what over the last year, 2 years, that we've been doing with our efforts in the off-ramp, kind of the welcome, where people are seeing in the economic development strategic plan that Chabon put it together for us. They had recognized that we may not be as inviting to people as we could be based on image of as you enter town. So I just wanted to have Jack walk you through what we can and cannot do, kind of some of our challenges with our partner, the state. And so I'll turn some time over to Jack to talk to you a little bit about what's happening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Welcome home, right? So I'll do a quick run through of what we've been doing, what we're doing now, and what we're looking to do. So the TI areas typically were maintained by ADOT in the past, both in-house with their crews, and then I think at one point in time they also had contract services that helped them. They indicated that they no longer have the staff or the funding to provide maintenance to those areas, so had just completely quit. So for a period of time, sanitation was using their inmate crews to go out and do some weeding and trimming and just some general maintenance, trash pickup, those sorts of things. When Manager Bacon, he was here, he asked us to step that up a little bit, so we ended up taking our inmate crews, city staff, and also temporary crews to help supplement that and do more work in those areas. In that, just a number for you guys, there's 3.5 million square feet accumulative between the three TI areas. So they're pretty significant footprint. And when you're talking about the TI, I'm just going by ADOT standard, which is the gore of the off-ramp to the gore of the on-ramp. So, you're looking from point to point, so to speak. In that, we went in, again, general trash pickup, weeding. We began a chemical application for weed abatement as well, and we actually upped our budget. So we doubled our budget so we could accommodate additional applications within the TI. So right now, just checked our numbers today. We actually made a order recently, so we're running about 20,000 this year currently, and we're really getting into the part of our chemical applications, if you will. We are also actually purchasing, I actually just got one finally purchased today, some additional equipment, which is primarily for use on the TIs, some smaller mowers and things, so we can work a little quicker in there and improve what we're cutting right now. Just, not that you guys probably care, but we have just a rotary deck, and we're getting a flail mower that will help mulch the stuff as we're cutting it a little better, so we don't have a lot of big bulk weeds and things blown around. In the equipment, you're looking at about another $15,000 that we've spent. And like I say, primarily that was purchased for the maintenance on these TIs. Toward the end of last fiscal year, speaking with Manager Foggin, he'd requested that we up our our temporary crews to try and accommodate the typical weed abatement we do out in the residence areas, and also to help with, again, to supplement the TI areas. So we did that last year. We're currently running inmates. We went to 2 temporary crews this year again. Now we're rolling back into the season. So looking at the numbers, we're gonna be about 120,000 worth of temporary labor services to carry those 2 crews. That'll be supplemented by our guys. When I'm talking about the chemical applications, just keep in mind that's just the chemical itself. That's not our staff time going into actually applying that. That's just the purchase of the chemical. So as far as ADOT participation, they've pretty much stopped all of their maintenance activities. And I say pretty much, they've stopped all their maintenance activities on the TI areas. The only thing that has happened, and it's coordinated through ADOT, is they have their community service crew from the Department of Corrections come out and do some trash pickup every once in a while. They did it a couple weeks ago. We might see them once or twice a year if things are going well. That crew stays pretty busy because they just take requests from multiple places, including us. We went into an agreement, a MOU with ADOT, trying to get something back for the efforts that we're providing into these TI areas. And so in that MOU, we used to get ice melt and some other things that we would essentially trade back and forth on, and ADOT pulled away and said that they couldn't provide anything outside of their right-of-way. So the ice melt we used to get, the pre-treatments they used to do on our bridge decks, that sort of thing, they had stopped with. So we negotiated an MOU. Currently, we get 15 tons of ice melt, which most years we probably will be behind on, but this year it was pretty good timing having that in place. So they will also do 6 pre-treatments on our bridge. So they'll go out and brine Wallapai Mountain Bridge. They'll do the underpass at Airway and the railroad, and they'll also do the El Travador Hill. And that's just to try and keep ahead if we do have icing issues. Again, most years we probably won't even utilize that. In return, the city will provide 1 chemical application to the TI area per year. Again, that's roughly about $10,000 just in the chemical that we're providing to do that. And then also we will sweep the on-ramps and off-ramps 4 times a year. Now, when I'm talking the on-ramps, off-ramps, we're not talking the Surface Street, Andy Devine, Beal, those. We do those pretty regularly. We're actually getting onto the on-ramp, off-ramp areas and going onto the freeways to sweep those. So ADOT does participate in that by providing traffic control and the attenuator and that sort of thing. So that's a joint effort because we're not equipped for working on the freeway. So this MOU is actually in addition to a couple of IGAs. One IGA that the city currently has, we're actually responsible, which this just popped out from 1973 and resurfaced for the sidewalks on Beal and then also on Andy Devine in the ADOT right-of-way. And you've probably noticed those aren't in great shape, and that's how that kind of resurfaced. So we actually have a project that's about $48,000 right now just to address the Beale Street sidewalks. And then next fiscal year, we'll move over and we'll do the ones on Andy Devine. Excuse me. So ADOT also said that they would provide decorative rock or rock. I wouldn't necessarily call it decorative. I apologize. I had a sample of it I was going to bring, and it is sitting on my desk in my office. So at some point in time, I'll provide that to Manager Fogg, and you guys can take a look at it. Initially, they thought they would have enough to do a pretty significant amount of the TI footprints. The last conversation I had with ADOT, they're going to provide us with 2,500 tons. So out of the 3.5 million square feet that there is between the 3 TIs, you're looking at roughly 250,000 square feet of coverage with the aggregate at 2 inches deep. Again, it's not a true deco rock. It's not colored. It was out of a gravel pit that they were using to produce aggregates for asphalt and concrete on ADOT permits, and they're trying to do a clean closure and get out of the gravel pit business, so to speak. So that's where we're going to get that rock. They're going to provide the aggregate, but we're going to have to either use city forces to place that to do the grading and placement, or we'll have to use a contractor. I don't have a price back. I did reach out to one of our JOC contractors to ask them for a price for putting that rock down. Some additional items I asked them for. There's some fairly large dead trees in their right-of-way, so I asked them to add the removal to that. As well, the irrigation system, I'm not sure what shape that's in. The trees are established. If we get a really dry year, I'd worry about their health, and that's another item I'll address on the limitation side. And then also, the end of that would be to go in, grade, place the rock, and in that, the city streets crew would actually go in and apply treatments. So when they grade it, we would apply a pre-emergent. Once the rock was down, we'd apply another one, and that would hopefully help with the weed maintenance in the future. Some of the limitations we have obviously are financial and staffing. We have a pretty significant area to cover in general as far as weed abatement and other services that's provided through Public Works. Trying to set the appropriate service level for each one of those and keep up with them is kind of a moving target at times, trying to make sure that we can keep up, especially when we have storms and different events that come through. I mentioned irrigation. I don't know what kind of shape the irrigation's in. If we wanted to try and keep that and be able to water the vegetation that's in place, we'll have to address that. The JOC contractor was just gonna have somebody come out initially, look at it, try and figure out what's still viable and what could be repurposed, so to speak. And then we would go back and look at that, and before we place the rock, if we had to make big changes to the irrigation system, we would end up getting a price to do that. The other thing I mentioned was landscape and vegetation health. There's some landscape or ground cover plants in there that I'd like to see go away personally. Those would be good candidates for rock, prevent the erosion and things that they were trying to with the plants, but the plants become trash catches. They're hard to maintain. They're shrubs, and they're just, they don't look great. Overall, everything we do in the TI area or an ADOT right-of-way in general requires their approval. That's not the end of the world. That's not super difficult. We just have to work with them. They have some hard no's, some things that they just will not do, environmentally, signs, different things, but it's something we can work through with them. With that, I don't know if you guys have any questions that I can answer.
Any questions, Mr. Fonte? City Manager? Oh, you have a comment? Okay. Councilman Staley?
Yeah, thank you for this. Once it came up in the economic development plan, I thought, this is a good place to start. What I sort of had hoped for was to see each one of those re-rocked, like you said, and then it would be really nice if we could put in native plants, low water use plants. I talked to Gary Kellogg about putting in lantana, which flower a majority of the year, and then you can just cut them to the ground in the winter. But it'd be nice if you rolled in, into town, and then you had all these flowers to sort of greet you. And I had also hoped for some signs, nice signs that say "Welcome to Kingman" or something like that. So I know you said this was a multi-step approach, but it would be, when you roll into a nice city, they have these off-ramps that are clean, weed-free, but they're also landscaped, and there's usually a sign so you know where you are and you're being welcomed into town. And so that's my hope for the future.
Thank you. Any other comments? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since we're on the topic of city entrances, and it is in the Economic Development Strategic Plan, it's an area that we need to address. Recently, there have been a couple of Sundays in the afternoon where I get stuck coming back from Vegas on the 93. And I look to the right, immediately right when I get into town, and the first thing I see on the right is huge stacks of these old tires. It's a gas station that hasn't been used for many, many years. You go just a few little rolls farther down, and then there's a whole bunch of different like old cars and like buses and RVs, not behind a site restricting fence. I mean, where do we stand on those things? Don't we have codes that we enforce for that kind of stuff?
So we absolutely do, and that's one of the things that I've talked to Police Chief DeVries on, and for that, I think it's been referred to me a couple of different ways as you come into town, gasoline alley or whatever. But that is one of the places where as we move forward, looking at our code enforcement, making sure, I know that part of town is part of what we monitor. Where we are in the process of getting properties cleaned up, he was not here to be part of this presentation, so that, again, will be part of as we move forward. But that was a big portion of coming into town, where people are actually parked there for a long period of time, getting an opportunity to kind of digest, and that's not, as far as economic development and the pride in the community, we can definitely do better through that corridor. And so just understanding where properties are in the code enforcement process, I can't tell you, but I know that the Chief DeBreeze was knowledgeable about things happening there. We just didn't get a chance to get an update on where those properties are, as far as being, can they be cleaned up by the city? Are they being cleaned up by a property owner? All of that stuff will have to be another part of our conversation. And it's just as a reminder to everybody that we do have the Beale Street interchange that's been funded, and as part of that project, one of the things that we've already started talking to ADOT about is there's going to be a large section as you enter the city off of that interchange that's going to be just open space. And we got to the table very quickly to make sure that they understood that we wanted that to be a welcoming face to anybody who visits. The welcome signs, the challenge that we currently have, and I know exactly what Councilor Scott Staley is talking about. We've all been on those new interchanges where they've got art, or they've got landscaping, or they've got both. And that, those people, those communities had a little bit of a head start on us in that they're recently done. And with those new interchanges or revamping of interchanges, the community has an opportunity to participate up front and add a little bit more money to those interchanges, and that's where you see those really super nice improvements above just what ADOT would do, is because the community's throwing in money to those. And so we're starting a little bit behind because our interchanges have been there for a long time. As Kingman Crossing interchange develops, and as this Rancho Santa Fe interchange develops, those are things that we're definitely going to want to have in mind as we get new interchanges and what they're going to look like before they get handed over as just a regular standard run-of-the-mill interchange. But like I said, I wanted the council to kind of understand where we are, the amount of work that we're doing to try to get these interchanges looking better, because they have been ignored. ADOT, they are ADOT's infrastructure. They, as Jack mentioned, they did at one point maintain their interchanges, and when funds dried up, of course, they don't care about the image of the city. So that's where, Jack's trying to identify, let's get the dead trees out. Let's see what we can do to put the right plantings in. And if there is water infrastructure, sprinkler systems in there, then is there some different plant that we could utilize? As far as coming in from Vegas or leaving to go to the Vegas area, that area definitely needs to be part of what we're looking at. For now, like I said, when the new interchange comes in, we're going to have an opportunity to take a different bite than what we are right now, but that's still a couple years off. So there's some work, and we can definitely report on code enforcement efforts in that area so that you know what's happening and what's being done. So,
Thank you, Manager Fogg, and thank you, Mr. Planty. I think we're going to have to move
Yep.
forward to our next item.
yep. Well, the next item is going to be really short. So,
Oh, good.
So,
Well, thank you so
so
much.
everybody can take a break here.
Okay. The next item for our work session is a work session discussion.
Yes, and
Manager Fogg.
I apologize for missing the last one. I've met several times with my leadership team with regards to work sessions. I know I've talked to the mayor several times about it. I'm familiar with the discussion that the council had. And what I'd like to do is I've got a proposal for the council that I think ends up being kind of the happy medium that y'all talked about. And that is, and I'd like to start this with our first meeting in May, and that is we'd cut the work session down to about 55 minutes, start at 5 o'clock, and start our business meeting at 6 o'clock. That seems to be kind of the middle ground of what all the discussion was. I know that there was some discussion about having work session after the business meeting. I will tell you that with an example of today, where we have consultants and experts coming in to talk to us, these folks try to make it back to generally most of them are from the Phoenix area, to save cost to the city and to get these folks back to the metro area where they live. There's just a fairness issue there and a cost savings that we would occur if we put the work session after the council meeting. So I'm hoping that the 5 o'clock start will be adequate or not adequate. I hope that you can make that work within your schedules. I know that there's people that work till 5. I don't believe there's too many folks that live more or that work more than 10 minutes away, so we felt like we weren't going to cut into people's work schedule too much, and yet we could still get business done in that 55 minutes. So that's kind of what I'm proposing. We'll give that a try. If it's not working or we need to do something differently, we will continue to evaluate that and what we're able to cover in work sessions. But that will move us earlier for the business meeting, and it will shrink the time that we have for work sessions. So we'll have to be a little bit more cognizant of how long we take and what gets put on work sessions. But I think we're willing to do that. And like I said, we will evaluate that after a couple of months. And if it's working, great. If it's not, we'll probably have to come back and have another conversation about what different approach we can take with work sessions. But that seemed to be the happy medium from what I understood the conversation to be. So that's what we're proposing to start the first meeting in May. So we'll be here at 5 o'clock for work sessions. The business meeting will start at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, and I'm sure our public information will make that all known to the public. Thank you. Okay, well, I guess are there any comments? Any protests? Okay, then at 5 o'clock at the next session, we will begin our work session. With that, I think we've concluded our discussion, so if there's a motion to adjourn, I'll entertain it. I'll move.
Second?
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. We will convene again at 7 o'clock for the regular meeting. Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our City Hall Council Chambers. We're glad to be here tonight, and we welcome you. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call.
Mayor Miles.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lingenfelter.
Here.
Councilmember Mello Keener.
Here.
Councilmember Nelson. Here. Councilmember Scott Staley.
Present.
Councilmember Watkins.
Here.
Councilmember Wade.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you to rise and stand for the invocation, which will be given by Chaplain Paul Pitts, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear wise and loving Father, please be with all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself and for the measure of health we each have. Lord, we need to fulfill our calling as leaders and citizens. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well, Lord, for the freedom to embrace you. In the scriptures, you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, Lord, I pray for our mayor in particular, also for this assembled council. I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times. Provide them a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, and personal peace in their lives and joy in their work and task. So I pray tonight for the agenda that is set before them. Please guide in what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Kingman. It is in your most blessed and holy name that I pray these things. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. The council may go into executive session for legal counsel in accordance with ARS 384103 to discuss any agenda item. The following items may be discussed, considered, and decisions made related thereto. First order of business is approval of minutes, and we have three sets. First, the regular meeting minutes of February 5th, 2019. Has everyone had a chance to review these minutes? Yes. Then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes of February 5th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion is second to approve February 5th, 2019 minutes. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Regular meeting minutes of January 15th, 2019. I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes from January 15th, 2019.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to approve the January 15th, 2019 meeting minutes. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Regular meeting minutes of April 2nd, 2019. I would entertain a motion regarding these.
I move we approve the regular meeting minutes from April 2nd, 2019.
Is there a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the April 2nd, 2019 meeting minutes. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. The next order of business is an appointment to Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commissioner Terry Hunsaker has resigned. The term of the office will end on December 31st, 2019. Applicants to fill the vacant position are Mike Blair, Michelle Drumheller, Jed Noble, Vicki Kress, and Jennifer I'm going to mess it up. Okay, thank you. In accordance with Section 2-157F1 of the Kingman Municipal Code, all persons eligible to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission must be a city resident and be a registered voter for at least 180 days before appointment. Staff recommends appointment of one of the applicants to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term ending December 31st, 2019.
Mayor,
So-
can I just, there was another name and I wasn't sure if you skipped it on purpose or Mark Nelson?
Mark Nelson has withdrawn.
Oh, okay, I wasn't aware of that, I'm sorry.
So I just left it off.
Makes sense.
We have 5 applicants for this position. I'd like to offer each of them an opportunity to come up and address the council if you would like. And going alphabetically, is Mike Blair here? No? Okay. Michelle Drumheller?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm not sure what you would like to know. Anything about me? Just say something.
Well, actually, anything you'd like to tell the council about your interest in this position?
I
Why
would
you're
love to give
interested?
to the community of Kingman, and I moved here from Baltimore in July, and excuse me, the Kingman is near and dear to my heart. My family came here in 1898, and I have a advanced degree from McDaniel College, and I'm a quick study. So that's pretty much who I am.
Thank you for your interest.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have, is it Jen Noble or Jed? I have, it's Jed Noble, okay, so, Jed Noble, he here? Vicki Kress.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm Vicki Kress. I had the honor of being on planning and zoning for about 5 years before I was selected to join city council in 2016. I would like the opportunity to serve on the commission again. I believe I have valuable experience and history and background that could benefit the commission.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your ongoing dedication to the city.
Thank you.
Jennifer Blancourt.
Hello, I am Jennifer Bonacore. I recently moved to Kingman. It would be December 2017. My husband and I decided to get out of Southern California, and we have family in Lake Havasu and also here in Kingman. I have a sister who runs the Humane Society right now. We came here because the first moment we laid eyes on Kingman, we thought, this is where we want to be. We knew we wanted out of California, and we needed to be near our parents, but Kingman, I mean, right away. And one of the first things we saw was that one of the parades, I don't know, it might have been in September, and I thought, wow, this is the greatest. They actually have a hometown parade here. And that was one of the things that drew us. Again, the moment we saw it, this was it. Even before I found a job here, I work at the New Court Kingman facility, and which I do love. It's an absolutely great place to work, and I think probably one of the best places in Kingman. And but we actually found a house before I even got the job. That's how certain I was that I was going to be here. And this has also been something that I've dreamt of, is being a part of something. You know, down in Southern California is huge. Masses of people constantly, but we wanted to be a part of something smaller, but something that's also growing and something we saw potential in. I've lived in foreign countries, so both France and Sweden, so I've seen what historic places can be, and especially be. And I've seen some of them grow, but grow properly. But being here, like I said, is something that I've yearned for, place I've wanted to be. And being on the Planning and Zoning Committee, I really think that having been living in other places, foreign countries, and I've also had management jobs in my past. I've worked with people my whole life, and I think that I could fulfill this position. Absolutely. I know there's a lot to learn, but who can't learn? So,
Thank you so much.
thank you very much.
I appreciate it. We have a ballot, and but before we actually vote, is there any discussion by members of the council? Any comments or questions?
Mayor, may I make a comment? I just really appreciate that those that apply actually come to speak to us. No, thank you. Thank you. We do love hearing from you and seeing you in front of us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Indeed. Any other comments? Okay, we're going to take just a moment. We'll fill out our ballot and submit it to our city clerk, and she will announce the candidate that is selected. So if everybody would just vote and pass it down. Thank you.
right, the top vote recipient was Vicki Kress.
Vicki, congratulations. Ms. Kress, welcome back to P&Z. And to everyone that applied, we really thank you and appreciate it. Please keep your name in for other commissions. We would appreciate that also. Your volunteerism is welcome. Okay, now...
Mayor, could you just do me one little favor and
No.
do that in a motion?
Oh, you're
Thank
such
you.
a stickler
I
for
know,
that.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we've got to follow our particular
It's okay.
rules. I would entertain a motion to appoint Ms. Vicki Kress to our Planning and Zoning Commission.
I'll move that we appoint Vicki Kress to our Planning and Zoning Commission.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Vicki Kress to our Planning and Zoning Commission. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Ms. Kress, you are appointed. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Keep us in line. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a very special recognition. And actually, this is probably the first time in my experience that the City of Kingman has had the opportunity to present a key to the city to one of our own, and that is going to be Santa James Zyla. And we're also going to honor him with a Unity Award, which is the first time the City of Kingman is giving this. And at this time, I'd like to read a little introduction to explain what this is all about, and then I'm going to invite Santa James to come forward and give him the actual key and certificate. So tonight we are going to recognize a unique individual, Santa James Zyla, who has been a part of our Kingman community for many years. Most of us originally knew him only as the man who dressed as Santa, who wandered our streets, seemingly in need of help. As time passed, we heard stories about he had a great talent and used it to give back to people in our assisted living facilities. He would play beautiful music for them and then wander back into the streets. Being legally blind, it was clear he maneuvered his loaded cart carefully through cold winter and hot summer days. And yet, if you stopped to talk with him, you found him a person who offered intellect, a quick wit, and a very positive nature, which he shares abundantly. He wasn't homeless, he was on the road, and we were beginning to understand that Santa James was a gifted musician, poet, and actor. Our Kingman community has a great spirit of caring and compassion. So many were touched by his unique and positive spirit that people gave more than money for meals or coffee. A whole cadre of people surrounded Santa James to lift him up and celebrate his unique gifts. Some of those people are here tonight, some are not, but I'll mention a couple. Mike Miller, who started a GoFundMe page to purchase a keyboard. Pat and Judy Berry, who offered a van as his original housing here to get out of the weather. Then Mrs. McQueen, a teacher at Lee Williams High School, asked the students to take on a project based on a play they were studying, The Crucible, about those who live on the margins. One of the students, Kayleen Purcell, brought Santa James to class, where he captured their attention and imaginations. Kayleen went on to arrange with Canyon 66 Restaurant for him to play once a week in exchange for a room. Now Santa James is a regular there, and in Laughlin. He has over 4,000 followers on his Facebook page and continues to amaze. His companion, Kathy Bent, is working with him to continue making good things happen. It's been quite a journey for Santa James and Kingman, one that has been recognized by a front page article in the April 10th, 2019 Los Angeles Times. This article gives national attention to our community's goodwill and to Santa James. The positive press is appreciated, and the actions of this community and Santa James are noteworthy. As our own police chief DeVries has said, Santa James has been adopted as our community grandfather. So I am proud tonight to present James Zyla with the key to the city of Kingman and our city's first Unity Award for bringing together people from all walks of life, all ages, and numerous cities to make sure that the music continues. So I would ask Santa James to come forth, and I will read just a little bit. We have a beautiful certificate here.
Is there a microphone?
There is the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Santa James. you're going
Yes.
The key to the city has a symbolic meaning stemming from the time when medieval walled cities had gates which would be guarded during the day and locked at night. The key symbolizes the freedom of the recipient to enter and leave the city at will, a true trusted friend of the city. Santa James Isla, you are a friend of the city of Kingman. You are a person who continues to share your gift of music to those in the city who live in assisted living situations, and did so even when you were walking the streets of Kingman, pushing your keyboard in a shopping cart. You are a person who inspires citizens of this community to help, because though your sight is limited, your intelligence and talent is evident, as is your iconic dedication to Santa Claus, a character of goodwill and giving. This key is also a symbol of Kingman community's vast heart, willingness to help and give a hand up. It recognizes the many people and organizations that have banded together to provide a safe place for you and forums for your music and wit to be displayed. May your journey continue to be one of positive life and light. Presented this day on April 16, 2019. And this is the key.
Thank you very much.
I would like to also give you a Unity Award that says, I, Janine Miles, Mayor of Kingman, Arizona, do hereby present the City of Kingman Unity Award, James Island, known as Santa James, for touching the hearts of so many of our citizens, inspiring a community effort to ensure your music, which is played and heard with the heart, continues.
Thank you very much, Mayor Miles. I'd like to thank you and the council members and all of the people gathered here and all of the people of Kingman. And I would say in a nutshell, as I've said many times before, there exists in the city of Kingman a spirit of generosity you don't find in a lot of other places. There's a lot of give and take. And my main thrust is love, peace, harmony, and rock and roll. It's not 100% of the time. However, I would like to invite everybody to join us later on because we'll have a discussion about the future, which is an entry for the Laughlin Film Festival. And all of the movie scripts I've written are based in Kingman. Time to give you all the script and everything. But if anybody could join us, and then I can give a brief outline of what it is we're trying to do specifically, like the Internet Piano Barn. It allows us to play music for people and also share it through the internet with different themes, such as for the cat and dog shelter, or for the autistic children, or for the retirement home. So I don't have to go from one place to another, so we can find a location and share it. And when people get used to the concept, then that way we can bring the music, the movies, all of the poetry and everything else. And it's a teamwork, because I'm missing some very valuable team members to be able to make a movie and a concert tour, anything like that work. So if anybody is here that either knows me or wants to join us later on to have a conversation, I would really appreciate it. I can't tell you enough, especially the key, especially this. That was a surprise. I wasn't expecting that, but I really appreciate it. And as you know, there's a street named after a man, Andy Devine. In the past, Andy Devine was associated with the city of Kingman. Now, I hope in the future that we could, let me try and be polite, that we could bring some of the Hollywood celebrities that may not be in the same tune with us, to bring some money where their mouth is, to make the biggest performing arts center in the world, in Kingman, with the
I
money.
love your great plans.
Yes, if
Santa
anybody
James.
would like to
I
discuss
love it,
anything.
and I'm going to have to
Yes.
kind of move this meeting along.
Yes,
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. Okay. We now have on the agenda a call to the public. Those wishing to address the council should fill out request forms in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda, with the exception of those on the consent agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. Do we have any individuals signed up for public comment? Are there any individuals that wish to address the council? Then we will move forward to the consent agenda. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Does the council have any items that they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through H as presented.
I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through H. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. There is no old business tonight, so we will move ahead into new business. And the first order of business is a public hearing and consideration of encroachment permit application for 2123 Horsemint Avenue. On March 18, 2019, staff received a substantial encroachment permit application from Paige Ayers of 2123 Horsemint Avenue for installing non-permanent fencing and landscape rock within a city-owned parcel adjacent to her home. Ms. Ayers also requested to place personal property on the city land. The parcel is identified as Parcel B of the Canyon Bluff Estates 2, Tract 6005 subdivision. Staff recommends that council hold the public hearing, review comments and concerns, and make a final decision on the request. Should the encroachment be allowed, staff further recommends that no permanent structures, trees, bushes, or personal property be allowed on the city parcel. Staff would also recommend that a provision for calling blue stake prior to a placement of any landscaping be a condition of approval. Mr. Henry, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. As the mayor stated, this is a public hearing on an encroachment permit application that is received in the engineering department from Paige Ayers of 2123 Horsemint Avenue. Before I get into the details, I do want to point out that this item 6A, and item 6B are generally related to the same area in question that we're talking about, so any decision the council may make with this item potentially could affect the decision the council would make on the second item. So I just want to point that out. I'm just going to go through the attachments that are in the packet there. Basically, just starting with our location here, we are in the Canyon Bluffs 2 subdivision, south of Wallapai Mountain Road, south of Mission Boulevard, Horsemint Avenue. The applicant, Paige Ayers, has an existing home here at 2123 Horsemint Avenue. Parcel B is located to her south. There's an existing 8-inch sewer main in Parcel B. Parcel B is a 16-foot wide public utility parcel that was given to the city when the subdivision was platted. Here's a copy of that plat. We can see 2123 to the north, Parcel B here to the south. This is a view of Parcel B looking towards the east. See the Wallapai Mountains in the background. There's landscape rock here. Parcel B essentially starts at this existing wall here and continues over 16 feet. There's the same view of that parcel looking back towards the east. Again, here's the existing wall. This is 2123 here where this gate is, and 2119 on this side. This is the application that was received. I'll just read from this comment area here. The applicant has requested, as stated, this is an area of city property connected to my lot. I would like to have access to place non-permanent fencing and to be able to put some personal property on. I would also like to be able to add landscape rock. I will point out that our regulations typically would allow a property owner to landscape adjacent city property, whether it be right-of-way or parcel, without the need for an encroachment permit, provided they were not exceeding anything 6 inches in height. So it could be landscape rock, some bricks, gravel, that sort of thing. And that's just part of the application, showing again parcel B. So I need to point out that 4 months ago, on December 19th, there was a meeting in the Planning and Zoning office downstairs here. The city was approached by the builder of 2119 Horseman, and there wasn't a home there at the time. There is there today. They had requested in advance to put some gates up and to use parcel B for landscape purposes. An email was sent to the builder at that time, Mr. Gary Halbert, allowing him to do so. There were 6 conditions included in the email. I'll read them for the record. Condition 1 was that 2 gates may be placed across each side of parcel B, including the side adjacent to Horseman Avenue and the side adjacent to Slaughterhouse Canyon Road. Number 2, each gate must be left unlocked to provide access to utilities within parcel B. Number 3, no structures or walls may be placed within any portion of parcel B. Number 4, parcel B may be landscaped with rock and maintained by the adjoining owner at 2119 Horseman Avenue. 5, no trees or shrubs shall be planted within parcel B. We have a existing sewer line in that parcel, and trees and shrubs typically don't do good with sewers, so that's the reason that one was there. Number 6, blue stake must be contacted before any digging takes place in the right-of-way. That's just a general recommendation that we've made anytime anyone were doing any landscape in the city right-of-way. So that agreement was sent to the owner, again, of 2119. Early in March, I was approached by the owner of 2123, Ms. Ayers. She was concerned about potential landscape and gates and structures that were apparently under construction at the time. So, in my opinion, that original agreement that was made in December had been violated, and I had sent a letter essentially revoking that agreement for 2 reasons. One, there were some column structures that were being constructed adjacent to Ms. Ayers' fence at 2123. And 2, there had been some work in there, including some grading, and I received a copy of all our blue stake tickets, and there was no blue stake ever specifically called for parcel B area. So in consultation with our city attorney and city manager, I made the decision to revoke that original agreement that had been made December 19th. Subsequently, Ms. Ayers, the owner of 2123, as well as the owner of 2119, have both applied for an encroachment permit, which is our normal procedure for any time somebody really wants to come in and use the city right away. I've included just our standard requirements for encroachment permits, mainly for information, in case any questions might arise. Obviously, one item is a requirement for a public hearing. There was some noticing requirements. Unfortunately, I think the notices noticed the hearing for 5:30 instead of 7. It's unfortunate that happened. I guess it's better that it was noticed early than late, so. Comments, did receive some comments from Rich Ruggles in Planning and Zoning, kind of reiterating some of those conditions that were in that December 19th email that had been sent out. No structures, no permanent fencing, that gates, if they were allowed, they would remain unlocked in order for the city to be able to have access to its sewer line, which runs in the parcel. That the parcel could be landscaped with rock and maintained by the adjacent owner, the adjoining owner. Again, no trees or shrubs, blue stake, and Rich acknowledges that there had been a second encroachment permit applied for at that time as well. So the notice went to all the public utilities that might otherwise have facilities or otherwise want to use this parcel in the future. I received one comment from Cable with no objections. Their only question was when the landscape work and fencing might take place. I do have a letter that is not attached to the council, but I believe you have a copy. It came in yesterday afternoon about 3:30. It's from Nancy Nelson, who resides at 2112 Horseman, a little bit south and across the street from the parcel, but within that 300 feet notice area that we typically send out. And I just want to note for the record that we did receive her letter. City clerk has a copy for the record. I won't read it word for word. I do believe she has pointed out some things that she's concerned with, some CC&R issues. She is concerned with apparently unlawful access to the neighborhood from the public and residents coming through this parcel. I've heard that as a general theme from some other folks that have visited me since the time we noticed this a few weeks back until tonight. I've heard concerns from residents that there should be no vehicles traveling through Parcel B, and that there is actually a restriction on the west side of Parcel B, on the west side of all these lots, in fact, that there's no vehicle access to Canyon Road from any of these lots. I do know there's some people here, the applicant is here to speak on this item. I'm sure there's a few other people who have signed up to speak, and it's a public hearing, so anyone else may be entitled to speak. I think that's essentially the facts in a nutshell. I know it's, I have heard some people will tell me that since we have two people who are both interested in using this, that they feel maybe no one should be allowed to use it, and that maybe the city should just landscape the parcel and make it look good. So I do want to point that out to the council as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Henry? I have a couple, but first of all, is the city landscaping other rights-of-ways in that area?
No, ma'am.
I didn't think so.
No.
Okay. And these CC&Rs require a block fence at the back of every property, is that correct?
Yes, there is a copy of the CC&Rs, the back of the letter there, and I did read through them.
Does that mean that if they put gates up, that the fence that is already on the back of 2123 would count as the exterior fence for 2119?
Well, I think it's still going to, the city still has ownership of that parcel, and we're not bound to the CC&Rs. So it's only.
But the property owner is.
The property owner is, yes.
And my question is, can he claim that as his back wall?
Well, I might refer
might be
to
a
Carl
legal
on that.
question.
The property owner at 2123 has an existing block wall
I know.
across their entire property.
I'm just reading the CC&Rs, and it says that all of the lots are required to have constructed masonry block walls completely along the rear of the property. That would apply to 2119.
Yes, it would. It would apply to 2119 as well as 2123.
And currently, it does not have one.
There's a block wall at 2119 across the rear lot. There's not on the north side lot at this point. And I can go back to the
Would
photographs.
you do that? Because I think I'm not
Yeah.
seeing it.
And as he's pulling that up, just as a reminder, we don't enforce CCNRs. That is purely a civil action.
I'm just trying
for that
to
subdivision.
understand the situation.
Right.
Okay, Mayor, let me, so this is the new home here on 2119, where you see the cursor. And this block wall essentially goes across the entire rear lot line. So it's the side.
Oh, it is the side.
It's the side lot line that
That is
I believe
ours.
Ms. Nelson is referring to with respect to the CCNRs.
So that is our sewer line running through there,
Thank you.
through the side.
So, as Councilmember Nelson has pointed out, we're looking at the front yard here, the existing wall in the front yard, and then this is the block wall in the backyard that
Okay.
essentially comes across that. And then this would be the side yard block wall for 2123 on this side.
Okay. So the 2123 did their side yard, and that just requires landscaping. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Henry?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I know you referred to for the most part, no vehicles go through there, but of course, UTVs sometimes will cut through there, I would imagine, and that's probably where some of the concern is with this piece of property,
Yes, I've heard ATVs, yeah.
is to
UTVs
keep them
coming
out.
through. Yes.
And of course, then would we put up bollards or something like that to keep those vehicles, so people can still walk through there, but not access it with a vehicle?
I'm sure, yeah, we as the
That would be
city,
one-
we could put bollards up,
Okay.
or rocks of a
Or
certain
something,
size that
right.
might prevent that. Yes, I mean, the city could certainly.
Yeah, rocks will
do
look
that.
great, right, okay.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Henry. We have some people signed up for this item. We also have people signed up for B, but we're going to handle these separately. So,
I would say you could probably handle your hearing separately, but I would say you shouldn't make a decision until you've had both hearings.
Public hearings,
If that makes
thank you.
sense.
Thank you, okay. First person that is signed up to speak on this public hearing is Paige Ayers.
Mayor, council, thank you for your time. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. I'm the homeowner on 2123, and I'll apologize up front.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you pull the microphone a little bit close? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. When I purchased the property back in December, one of the things that attracted me to purchasing the land was that I had three sides without anybody that could come up to my lot. And my realtor specifically said, just, make sure you kind of keep an eye on as they're building over there to make sure that they maintain that. So when I came home and saw the footings built on the base of my wall, that's when I contacted Mr. Henry with some concern, because I said it appears as though the plan is they're just going to put a gate there that would then make that part of the lot adjacent to me. I didn't really know what to do at that point. I know there was some discussion. He said they had some meetings, and I kind of felt my only option was to apply for the encroachment permit. Basically, what I would like is for there to be space maintained between my lot and the way that it's set up with the 16 feet between the wall on the adjacent lot and mine. I would be happy to do landscaping on that. I actually approached the neighbors. I did an attempt to discuss maybe what some fair options would be for both of us. Sultan Abbas, who also, I believe, is signed up, he was my realtor who was a little more familiar with these kinds of things. Also, I believe, approached them to try to discuss, maybe something that would be a fair option for both of us. And we weren't able to speak with anyone at the owners on the other side. So I really don't know what their plans are. So But whatever your decision is, what I would like to do is to just maintain that open space one way or the other is what I'm basically asking. And if I need to do landscaping to do that, I'd be happy to do that. And also to work with the property owners on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sultan Abbas?
Thank you for having us. I'm Sultan Abbas. I'm a real estate agent with Remax Prestige Property. I was the agent for Paige. Paige had a situation. She had a nice house in Ranch Santa Fe. She had a certain situation, without going into details, affect the neighbors. She was thinking of replacing her house with more privacy property in Kingman. Cut the story short, we found the house she's living in only because, as she mentioned, has privacy on the three sides. One side has the Slaughterhouse Canyon Road, and then the other one, Horseman Avenue. And the third side was the easement owned by the city. Before we even put the offer in the house, when it was for sale, I went down to the city engineering, and then verbally I asked about it. They said it's a city property owned by the city. There's a sewer line on it. I asked if it could be sellable or so. They said it's not in the favor of the city usually to sell property or parcel has like an easement, not an easement like owned by the city, or has like even sewer or water or right of way or all the other things. So we went forward with the purchase of the house. That was one of the reasons, because of the privacy on the three side. We closed escrow on December 10 before the neighbor has reached the planning and zoning department. About a month and a half ago, we noticed that there's like some footing, concrete footing was putting in the easement or in the property, in the city property parcel. So I reached out to the gentleman who's in charge of the building. He told me he has a permit. I asked for a copy. I handed my business card to have a copy of the permit. Unfortunately, I never had it for about 3 days. Then I had to go down to the city engineering and explain the situation. So, however, we did file for encroachment, but the main reason not to obtain the parcel or have it back to our property, even thought we don't mind maintaining it and landscaping and keep it up to the code and rules and regulation. But the main reason, if this will be up to split or giving away to one of the neighbor, I think it's fair to be split fairly for both. I know you can't build a block wall in the middle of it because there is a line on it. However, if there is a two RV gates or whatever you want to call it, been okay to be putting on each side of the parcel, I believe we can put the third one in the middle, such as judgments. You don't have to go by it, and it's split it fairly, or maybe give it a privacy as it was and keep the city on it.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm. Barry Nelson?
I live just across the street and down a couple houses from this location. My feeling is it should be gated. And the reasons are, if it's left open, there will be traffic going through it. There'll be ATVs, UTVs, pickup trucks. They'll be bouncing over the curb, gutter, and sidewalks of two streets, because these houses sit right between Horseman Avenue and Slaughterhouse Canyon Road. It will be an illegal road is what it'll turn into. You say, well, you can put some boulders there. If you look all down Slaughterhouse Canyon, that subdivision is block walls all the way along it, with the exception of some very nice looking gates for access into some people's backyards. The same in the front, nice looking gates, not some cobbled up junk or boulders put in. For the security of the neighborhood, it needs to be gated so that we don't have unauthorized personnel slipping in between the two buildings after dark to steal everything that's not chained down. Slaughterhouse Canyon has a lot of undesirable people going down it. You see pickup trucks and trailers loaded with trash going down that road and coming back empty. If you've ever driven down that road, you'll see trash all over the place. They have painted the cliffs and rocks with nasty graffiti. They have their drunken parties down there and their drug exchanges. We don't want those people slipping in between the two houses into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're not going to, I'm not calling for a decision on this item until we've had the second public hearing, but I would ask if there's any discussion at this point from council. Okay, then, yeah. That's a good point. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Is there anyone else in the audience? This is a public hearing, so would anybody else like to address the council? You might be up for the... No, I don't have it. Okay, Nancy Nelson.
I'm the letter writer, and I hope you do read my letter. I kind of did a little bit of research on it. And I'm not going to go into any detail. I'm sorry that this conflict has risen in our neighborhood. And people are saying, well, if you leave it vacant, who's going to take care of it? There are people in that neighborhood that will weed it and clean it and whatnot. I would just say that I will read from the final plat what it says in the notes, which you have a copy of. Parcel B is dedicated to the public and the city for public utility purposes by the recording of this plat. And note E, the 5.00 foot wide public utility easement as shown herein is granted to the public and duly franchised utility companies for use as such by the recording of this plat. This plat was recorded in February of 2007. So if you just review the information, and we appreciate any time it's taken you to deliberate these facts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council regarding this encroachment permit? No, I'm sorry, sir. There's only one opportunity. Anyone else that hasn't spoken that would like to address the council? Third time, is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Public hearing is closed. Now I would ask the council, do you have any further discussion on this item before we move to the next public hearing? Okay, we will now address item B under new business, public hearing and consideration of encroachment permit application for 2119 Horseman Avenue. On March 25th, 2019, staff received a substantial encroachment permit application from Steve Hayes of 2119 Horseman Avenue to include parcel B as part of their yard by installing 16-foot wrought iron gates at each end of the parcel while landscaping and maintaining the city property. The parcel is identified as parcel B of the Canyon Bluff Estates 2, Tract 6005 subdivision. Staff recommends the council hold a public hearing, review comments and concerns, and make a final decision on the request. Should the encroachment be allowed, staff further recommends that no permanent structures, trees, bushes, or personal property be allowed on the city parcel. Staff would also recommend that a provision for calling blue stake prior to placement of any landscaping be a condition of approval. Mr. Henry.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Again, this is a public hearing for an encroachment permit application from 2119 Horseman Avenue. Again, we're talking Canyon Bluff Estates 2 subdivision, south of Wallaby Mountain Road. 2119 Horseman Avenue. The aerial photo doesn't show the new home that's there, but there is currently a home there, as you'll see in the next couple photographs. Again, parcel B is a city-owned parcel, 16-foot wide, approximately 107 feet long. Has an existing sewer main in it. This is parcel B, looking again to the east, Wallaby Mountains in the background. Looking to the west. This is a copy of the application that came from the current owner, Mr. Hayes. and was submitted by their agent, Lacey Mercer. And I will read the text here. The description of desired encroachment is to include parcel B in the yard of 2119 Horseman, 16-foot wrought iron gates on both ends of parcel B, and fully landscape and maintain parcel. Essentially, that kind of goes again with that original December agreement email that had been sent out to the builder of the home at 2119 at the time. And again, that upon the notice to me from the adjacent landowner at 2123, I took a site observation out there and determined that original email agreement had been violated. So I sent the letter revoking it and instructed the builder at that time that they could apply for their own encroachment permit for 2119, which again is the normal policy procedure for when someone wants to use a public right-of-way, public parcel. Just again, going through the requirements for encroachment permits. Ultimately, the city council makes the final decision on these. Same comments from planning and zoning on this one. And I attached the letter from Ms. Nelson again here, as her letter to me was addressed to both parcels, so applicable comments to both public hearings here. I think that's everything I've got. I'll be happy to try and answer any questions and then continue with the public hearing. I'm sure there's additional people who would like to come up and speak on this.
Yes, there are. Mr. Henry, it says staff recommends no personal property on the city land. Would that include RVs and vehicles?
Yes, it would be our recommendation to prohibit any vehicles or RVs that might be an issue anytime the city might need to access that sewer main for maintenance or operations
Boats.
of any sort. Boats, trailers, sheds.
So it would just be vacant, except for landscaping.
Except for landscape. And going back to that December agreement, that was staff's original intent, if you will, was to allow the landscape. There was never discussion of putting structures in there. In fact, structures were specifically prohibited. There was never discussion of RV or vehicles to be parked or placed in parcel B. So,
Is that enforceable?
I think it well could be, yes.
Are there any other questions or comments? Questions for Mr. Henry? Then we'll move forward with the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Henry. We have 3 people signed up to address this issue. Tanner Schroeder.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm up here tonight as a property owner in Canyon Estates and also as the developer, one of the developers as Canyon Bluffs Estate. We did have the meeting with the city back in December. The terms that were sent to us, we did follow. I do understand that this letter says that there was about 1 foot of material removed from parcel B. That is incorrect. Parcel B sits 1 foot lower than 2123 Horseman, and 2119 Horseman sits completely flat with parcel B. With parcel B. Also, we did call for a blue stake. The city did not mark the blue stake within the parcel, or did not mark the sewer line within the parcel. Before I dug, because I myself dug the footer for the columns to be put there. I did pull the end caps off of the sewer line on both sides of it. I did check to see how far down it was. Also, the columns do not meet the definition of a structure, nor do by themselves do they meet the definition of a wall. We only put those columns there to make sure that they were fully filled with concrete when we put the big gates on, because with it being an 8-foot gate on each side, it is going to pull quite a bit of weight. And if we did have a hollow column, it would pull out of the wall. When we met with the city back in December, we specifically asked if we needed an encroachment permit. And they told us no, we did not. We also explained to them that the people that were going to purchase 2119 Horseman did not want the property if parcel B was not included to be enclosed. They said that is completely understandable. They did ask us to attach the email to the deed so that everybody down the road who did purchase 2119 Horseman would have a copy of the terms. It wasn't until the day of closing that they called us and told us that we were no longer allowed to do it. At this point, I'm asking you to keep the original terms and the agreement to allow the homeowners at 2119 to enclose parcel B, fully landscape it, and maintain it. You can see from the pictures that is gravel put there. We did that ourselves prior to being told that we weren't going to be able to enclose it. You also asked the question about the wall not being there. The wall is not there until, we haven't put it up until this issue has been resolved, until we know for sure what we're doing at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Halbert?
Hi, my name is Gary Halbert, and I am the owner of GSH Construction and sat on the meetings with the city when this first started. And it all came about from other people saying, you know, are you guys going to gate this? We want our little community more secure, you know? So that's when we met with the city to see what we needed to do in order to make that more secure in there. And so when we went to the city, you know, we talked and explained everything. And again, just like Tanner said, they said we did not need a permit, that we could go ahead. So I got with the potential buyers. They signed the contract, assuming that we could put the nice gates up, keep them unlocked, you know, so that the city could have access to it. And I think a lot of this that's not a public access. It's a public utility access for the public utilities to be used. It's not for walking through, driving through, anything. It's a public easement. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Steve Hayes signed up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Steve Hayes, and our address is 2119 Horseman Avenue. I stand before you tonight to ask you for your help cleaning up. It seems to be a problem that has developed as a complete surprise to my builder and myself. I sincerely hope you can help me. First, a little bit about myself. I'm an outstanding citizen, voting American citizen, honorary discharged, disabled from the United States Marine Corps. I've worked hard for a life to create for my wife, my daughter, and myself. This is something we really wanted to do for our daughter. We bought the house with money from her grandmother and me in cash to make sure that she had a home to be in. My daughter and I are serious about becoming outstanding citizens of the history-rich city of Kingman. We will take pride in the property as we have in other properties we own. I have never had any complaints from any of my neighbors. I just wish to have a safe and secure place for my one and only daughter to live, and I create a future in Kingman. We were future contributioners and voters of the fair city. We picked this city, Kingman, because of the wonderful history and bright economic future. Everyone affiliated with the property is gainfully employed and pays taxes. Now I'd like to express some of my fears and property easement in question. There'll be trash and weeds and issues, and people can walk through the property. We wanted it safe. We're under the understanding we can only put rock there. That's not a problem. We'll put a gate at each end. It'll be open and only rock. We have no problem with that, and that's all we want to do. That way people can't be coming through on my daughter's property. Her master bedroom window sits right there. And the fire hazards and things that could happen. Also, we see the prior email. So I guess my greatest concern here is if the city doesn't allow me to do what we're supposed to do, is the city plan to buy the property back from us? Because we were not going to buy the property, we were bowing out until we got the email that I have in my hand that we could gate off each end. And the builder and I went together to buy nicer gates than normal with the screen on them and all the things, and we've already rocked the front half of it. And it's not like we're going nowhere, the house is paid for, so good or bad times, we're here to stay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council during this public hearing? Sultan Abbas.
Thank you. I know this is a different hearing, so that's why I raised my hand. I heard everything the other side have said, and then it's totally respectful, and then I understand their concern totally. If I will be concerned about my home safety, I can build a wall on my border, and I'll be safe. I don't think there is a fire hazard will caused by that small 16 by 102 easement. If you want it to be landscaped and maintained, we do believe we will do that as well if we contain it. We are not asking to have it all ourselves, as the other part has done. If it will be to be given to someone, I think fairly should be split evenly by putting 3 RV gates, and he will build the wall on his, half a wall on his side, and we'll take half a side of the wall on our side. We'll maintain half of it. They will maintain half of it. 3 gates will be accessible and locked, and I think that will meet all the requirements they have submit and they have told. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Mr. Nelson?
I just really don't understand how some of these parties can claim that they ought to be given this land to use for personal use. They didn't buy it. They don't own it. Now they want to say, well, it's mine to use as I want. I can store stuff on it or whatever. And it's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the council on this issue? Final opportunity. Anyone else? I'm calling this public hearing to a close. And I would open this floor for the council to discuss.
And Mayor, I was just going to make a couple of comments. I know a couple of people are saying this is an easement, this is city property, and whether someone's given an encroachment or a license to occupy that property, that encroachment and or license is temporary. So folks saying that they're going to rely on this for in perpetuity is not something that they can do. So we just need to make sure they understand that these things are temporary, as well as if we're going to allow somebody to encroach on the city's property, there may be small risk, but there's always risk involved of somebody becoming injured on that property when they're using it. So I would say any condition would require whoever is encroaching on the property is required to have some sort of insurance coverage, which the city will be listed as additional insured. And that's something that we do when we do these types of things. So.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. In fact, insurance was one of my questions, but I keep hearing reference to RVs and RV gates, but this is really not an RV issue. Is that true?
No, as far as I know, this is just a piece of property owned by the city that people want to utilize for some reasons. So.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I have, oh, okay.
Councilmember Nelson.
I just would like to point out that I actually, Councilman Watkins and I drove out and took a look at it, and it looks to me like there is no intention of putting a side wall, a cinder wall up. So my first concern, and I can kind of see where maybe the owner of 2123 says, it looks to me like they're going to take the entire area because the cinder block wall is not up. That's a legitimate concern to me, because if you're going to put up 2 8-foot fences up there, then to me it looks like you're planning on using it all for yourself, and you're not going to be opening it up. And yeah, there's a safety factor and everything else that's sitting there. That's my thoughts. When I went out and looked at it, that's kind of what I took from that.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilwoman Staley.
My question's for the city manager. Is this common practice that we would allow a homeowner to take over our property and just add it? Because it's really, with 2 gates, it's just making their yard much bigger. Is that common practice? Because it sounds like they just asked to use it and we gave them the okay to put up the gates. And I'm oversimplifying what happened.
No,
I'm
I think
curious.
that's, so we're approached from time to time with people who are interested in taking care of our property. So as a standard policy, we have the ability with internal in the organization to work with people who are willing to do that. So the opportunity to have this property improved so that it's not a weed fest, or that that it's taken care of, is an attractive idea for the city. We have a lot of what I'll call no man land that is designated or donated to the city. This would be one of those spots where, of course, the infrastructure that sits underneath is extremely important. The ability to get to it, extremely important. The ability to help other utilities improve infrastructure in the neighborhood, very important. So, when you have a sewer, or, if, let's just say, someone decided they were going to do fiber optics as high-speed internet into the subdivision, this may be a way for them to do that, and that we would have the property to allow them to do it. But as far as letting folks maintain our property, yes, it's a common practice. In this case, it's one of those pieces that you would hope that we don't have to send mowers out to, and that we have to babysit, and having someone volunteer to take care of it is attractive, and something that we would do and have done in the past. So it's not an uncommon practice, and it's not an uncommon practice for all cities to have pieces of property like this. It is a little more unusual, I would say, to have gates across it, per se, not unheard of. Again, it's pretty common practice to be approached by someone who lives next to a piece of property that we own that's willing to take care of it. Of course, we're very sensitive to the idea of anything being built on it, or the idea that someone would claim ownership into the future, and that we try to be very clear that you're just helping us take care of our property.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Mello Keener.
The builder said that you did intend, you were just waiting to see what happened here, but you did intend to put a wall if it didn't go the way that you had initially planned, correct?
The wall it would be on the north side of the house, would not be there. A homeowner's insurance company will not insure something that's not included in their yard. Therefore, we can't put that wall up and landscape it and expect 2119 Steve's insurance to cover it. They will not cover it. There's a block wall. They can't cover something that's not owned by them.
That's a different issue.
If it doesn't go,
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're right. Let us have the discussion among ourselves now. The opportunity is gone for the public. Okay. My understanding from this is that, and I think that really was in response to your question about, or about your question about the wall. I also heard the developers say that they were waiting on the outcome to know about whether to build that wall. And I understand from what he said that if it's built, that insurance, there won't be any possibility for insurance to cover our land. So I get that. Looking at this, and of course, now I should have driven out to see it because I looked at the pictures very carefully, but I thought that was the back I was looking at. Now I understand its side. But having lived in a situation like this, I don't care if I had gates that were unlocked, I would not feel that was a safe alternative. I would feel, if I was really after the safety factor, I would want my wall. And that's me personally, but I think of what was mentioned about the daughter. And unlocked gates really aren't going to address a safety factor in my thinking. They're a visual block to traffic, I agree. But in terms of what would make me feel more safe, it would be a block wall. It's very difficult. I think this case is complicated by the dissension between the parties on either side of this public utility easement. And that makes it more difficult for me because if there was no dissension here, it would not be an issue for our council. We wouldn't have to be picking a side. I understand that the agreement, no good deed goes unpunished, right? And the city made a very good effort to be customer friendly in December and write out these conditions. But I also understand that there were some violations and it was canceled. And am I understanding all this correct, City Manager? So, and from what I've also heard, those heavy gates are going to require more reinforcement than currently may exist with that block wall. So I think what we're faced with is, it's not a Solomon decision, but I've heard split it down the middle from, and giving, I thought about that actually, as I thought about this, I thought, well, let them both split the gates, but then I thought the liability for the person, for your yard, is important because somebody could get hurt on that piece of property. And the city has to care about that. So I'm very interested in any thoughts, and I appreciate the ones that are coming from council.
Oh, I think, I'd love to hear what Ken has to say. My opinion is put the block wall up and let the city handle their property, especially in this particular situation, because there's no happy medium. We're not gonna make both sides happy in this situation. We just can't right now, unfortunately.
That's fact.
You know, unfortunately, if the sidewall isn't put up there and you put the gates up, from appearances and everybody driving through the neighborhood, they think it's their property. And, you know, appearances can be deceiving. And so I think we need to, I think what Councilwoman Nelson said too is the sidewall should be put up and the city will worry about what's the city's. That's probably the simplest thing for everything.
I totally appreciate that we actually love to work with our citizens and say, hey, please help us. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, and that's really what we need in this community. We absolutely do. But in this situation, we can't split it down the middle. You know, we have a sewer line sitting there, so
I agree.
we got to focus on that, what's right for the city.
Councilwoman Mellekiner.
I have seen in sections like this, it's not really a common area, but kind of a go through. They're like poles that are made out of cement, kind of, and rounded off, and there'll be 3 or 4 in a row so that the ATVs and that type of thing can't go through. And then giant boulders, I've seen that as well. So I think they're on Heather even down at the very end where you're going out into the desert. They have some big boulders so that you can't drive through there. So those are good options. That would be fair to both parties.
Any other comments?
I just have
Councilman
two
Wade.
things. I actually do like Dina's proposal. One of the issues I had when looking at these two proposals is that In the first one, it suggests that the owner intended to put personal property on it, and the second one says something similar, and it says something about that the parcel is identified, parcel B as part of their yard. So it looks, I'm coming to that same sort of reservation with respect to, the appearance of that being somebody else's property. And what the city, what Ron Foggin suggested is that, we need the ability to get to it. This is the city's property, and, I think both, there's merit to the underlying issues that accompany a parcel of property that has nothing, on it, with respect to like easement or like the public's access to that area. So, I don't know if at this time we can address that issue, or at least ask the city to, if we were to go that route and just have the city maintain that or deny both of these proposals, is there some kind of assurance from the city that we can, address the underlying issue, which is the safety concern and the access through those two properties, or between those two properties? That's what I'd like to look into.
Any other comments or questions? Then I would entertain a motion regarding, I guess in this case, item, since they are related, items A and B, is that right, Mr. Cooper? How would you suggest we handle it?
I think you're best to do a motion on each one individually,
Okay.
but I mean, it seems that we can see the direction.
I would entertain a motion on item 7A, public hearing and consideration of encroachment permit application for 2123 Horseman Avenue.
I will move that we not approve the permit application for 2123 Horseman Avenue.
Do I have a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to deny the encroachment permit application for 2123 Horseman Avenue. All in favor of denying, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. I will now entertain a motion on the public hearing and consideration of encroachment permit application for 2119 Horseman Avenue.
I'll move that we deny the encroachment permit application for 2119 Horseman Avenue.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
There's a motion and a second that we deny the encroachment permit application for 2119 Horseman Avenue. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, just to be clear, maybe Greg can tell me, but denial of this will have the effect of having a wall go up and no gates going in. Is that correct?
Definitely yes to the no gates, but the wall is a CC&R issue, so we would normally not get involved with enforcing that. It sounds like some of the neighbors might make an issue of it, as you've already seen the letter from Mrs. Nelson.
The problem I have with this one is, I mean, you have photos, but I didn't see any photos of pillars in the right of way. I didn't see any, I mean, we have two people, one said, I didn't see any blue stake, and the other person said, well, we did do blue stake. And based on those things, that's why the December 19th, 2018 agreement was revoked. So,
So
and
you
you're
can
saying
see
that that's what was done, but
there was a concrete footing poured here, and this is a rebar sticking up, and there's one also on the
Okay.
far side of parcel B as well.
all right. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Then I have a motion to deny the encroachment permit application for 2119 Horsemet Avenue. All in favor of denying, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Our next order of business is really a department. We have pulled the fishing pond update, so the next order of business is a department report from the...
Nope.
No, we have
Resolution 5205,
Oh my gosh, I forgot the big one.
The big one.
Maybe that was Freudian. Resolution number 5205, adopting policy guidelines and application procedures for the establishment of a community facilities district. Community facilities districts are special taxing districts created under Arizona Revised Statute Title 48 for the purpose of financing public infrastructure. Resolution number 5205 adopts policy guidelines and application procedures for the establishment of community facilities districts. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 5205, adopting policy guidelines and application procedures for the establishment of community facilities districts. Do we have anyone speaking to this? Director Tina Moline.
Thank you very much. So resolution number 5205 is the adoption of our policy guidelines and application procedures for the community facilities districts. Mark Reeder is going to get up and review those policies with you, but before he does, I just want to share that we as city staff, as well as Mark Reeder and our bond counsel, Mike Cafiso, made reference to several other cities within the states, utilize those policies and those guidelines from those cities who have been successful in forming CFDs. So with that, I'm going to have Mark come up. The policies and procedures that are going to be shared with you this evening are highlighted, and he's going to go over those particular areas, and then any questions we'll be able to answer.
Thank you, Tina. Hi, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's been a long night, I know. We talked about a lot of the substantive policies here. I just went ahead and used my judgment to kind of highlight for you maybe some of the substantive issues, and if you have any questions, or you want to talk about any amendments, I'll do my best. If there's some legal issues, we may have to get back with you, but I'll do my best to respond to your questions. So, we've talked about in the first two highlighted here, the CFD is a funding mechanism that allows us to finance certain eligible public infrastructure, and that in the third paragraph, that it's something that we consider and very carefully, obviously, that we're very measured in our policies here. To ensure the financial protection of all the property owners, the taxpayers, the city, obviously, and the CFD's lasting success, and that's what we're trying to accomplish with some of these policies. 1.3, a key tenet of this policy is the financial protection, as we mentioned. As such, this policy includes provisions that attempt to protect property owners from financial liability in excess of targeted tax rates and assessments. Similarly, this policy includes provisions designed to meet all financial obligations and our legal exposures of a CFD, as we chatted about. 1.9, we get a lot of questions on this. This is just kind of an equity requirement, because we want the property owners to put a significant amount of equity in the project. So most of the policies that we've been doing around the state require at a minimum 25 cents for every dollar of public infrastructure. That just shows that the developers got skin in the game and they're putting money in the ground and they're building public infrastructure. That's generally not a problem. They actually generally put more than that in there. That's kind of a minimum threshold. Does that make sense? Just to get them obviously very invested. That helps with our value to lien calculations and all the things we talked about. 1.1 is a big one relative to the governance. Hope you feel the same way. This policy currently says that unless otherwise agreed to and pursuant to state statutes, the CFD will be governed by the board of directors of the city. along with the 2 board members appointed by the largest landowners we talked about. Okay, so that's what this says. You know, the day-to-day administrative responsibilities of the CFD be performed pursuant to one or more contracts with outside personnel or by the city staff. In your case, it would be city staff. So that's what's in there, unless you want to change that. But I do want to highlight, because that's a big one, obviously. I think especially in this case where you have so many sources of funds coming together all at one time. 112 and highlighted there, this talks about the appraisal, you know, obviously required as a condition of selling bonds, required as a condition of the city's current policy of meeting year 4-to-1 value to lien at the moment. The appraiser works for the city, hired by the city, obviously. The appraisal has to be paid for by the developer because appraisals cannot be done on a contingent fee basis, I think, as you know. The developer can be reimbursed for the cost of that appraisal. My experience suggests they're not all that expensive, $25,000 to $35,000, I think, ballpark for a really good appraisal. It's probably about 300 pages, most of them, a lot of research. Let's see what else here. 113, all public infrastructure constructed or acquired by the CFD will utilize statutory public procurement procedures in accordance with applicable laws, rules, and regulations applicable. The procedures will be applied as they would in the case of the city. So the developer has to work really closely with the city engineer, public works director, and staff to publicly procure the public infrastructure, to bid it out, obviously get good bids, and keep track of good records, and then when we sell bonds, go ahead and reimburse them. And so that's another key thing that you want to, that the developer will have to do with the city as it relates to such public infrastructure improvements. If they don't do that, it's not eligible to be done on a tax exempt basis. 2.5 is along the board members. When the developer submits the application, they will you know, designate the 2 board members. Very interesting, the last item there in 2.5, all board members provide documentation evidencing each such member's obligation to comply with Title 38, Chapter 3, containing unqualified home harmless guarantees for the city, the CFD, and officers, agent, employees thereof. So anybody who's a board member, it's a pretty serious responsibility under ARS Title 38. It's been kind of fun. We haven't seen people jumping up and down to be on our CFD boards, but I'm sure that we can find a couple out there. Let's see, what else is to remember? So going through this very quickly, and then I'll respond to any questions. 2.13, we're going to ask them for a timetable, of course. When the developer submits the application for information, they're going to respond to each one of these questions. It's kind of where we're going with it. So we'll get a big binder from the developer, and they will respond specifically to each one of these questions for the city's review and for your professionals to assist in that review. So sources and uses of funds, financial feasibility on that, fiscal impact. 2.18 is the value to lien. We're going to ask them to comment on that from their perspective. O&M costs that we'll have to dig into. What are the operating costs of the district? Insurance will be part of that, as we mentioned. So we're going to have to deal with how the insurance is going to come together. 2.20 is the CFD development agreement. We've got really good copies of these for the developer and for the team. We can use other CFD development agreements that we've used across the state, and obviously correct that or make the appropriate changes as it relates to this specific project. We're going to ask the developer how they're going to help us solve the insurance issue. We do have an insurance issue with CFDs right now. You guys are a member of the Arizona Municipal Risk Retention Pool. That's good. They are providing insurance for our CFDs at the moment. For the 7 council members, they are not providing insurance for the 2 additional board members that would be part of your board.
So that's creating some problems, and we're meeting with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns on that in the next 2 weeks, try to correct it. Okay? So that's just a little technicality. I think we're gonna be able to work through it right now. But we'll ask the developer to also address that. And then indemnification, again, that's a legal issue. We'll get the attorneys in the room on that to see to what extent the city, the district may want to be indemnified in the event there's a problem. It's a construction issue, there's a lawsuit, trip and fall type thing. So indemnification comes up, becomes kind of a sticky wicket issue, but it's something that we can all work through together, I think. 2.23 is disclosure to prospective property owners. Under the law, whoever moves into that district, whoever acquires property in that district, will sign a disclosure agreement that they understand that there's a special assessment or a property tax. And we'll have the developer go ahead and provide that disclosure to the property owners. Development agreements, we talked about that. Gonna have to start working on that as we get in the room together. And then on 3.5 there, I mentioned this earlier, we have 60 days, once they submit the application to us, for the city council to make a decision or not make a decision. Hopefully we'll have all of the heavy lifting behind us, as I mentioned to you, through the negotiation of the development agreement and the CFD development agreement. If that's the case, my guess is we'll probably form it within the 60-day requirement. If there's some disagreements, that may not happen, and we have to explain to them, as it says here, in writing why we will not form the district. So we'll continue to communicate with you on that. If a completed application includes a petition for formation that is signed by owners of all the land in the proposed CFD and the formation of the CFD, the city may declare the district formed without posting, publication, mailing, notice, public hearings, or all the things that I mentioned. If that's not going to be the case, then we're going to have to go through the longer period of time. And if you go back in our book here on page 19, 20, and 21 that Michael Cafizo had prepared for us, it really kind of talks about that process. And I'm on 21 real quick. Owners of at least 25% of the land area in a proposed district petition the council for formation. So that's how we start. That's probably not going to be a problem, right? You may have one significant landowner within the boundaries of the CFD that allows that to happen. The mayor and council adopt a resolution declaring its intention to form the district. Notice of intention to form the district is mailed to all owners within the proposed district. Notice is also published in a newspaper of general circulation. The notice must indicate the time and place of a public hearing for the formation of a district and to inform the landowners of their right to object to the formation of the district. Again, we don't have the waiver. Any party claiming an interest in real property within the proposed district may object in writing, stating the specific reasons for the objection. Okay? Just thought I'd just spend a few minutes with you on this. At the hearing before the mayor and council, evidence is presented and written objections are ruled on. After the hearing, the mayor and council may modify the district, may carve somebody out, for example, or the general plan, and if deemed appropriate, order the district formed and a formation election to be conducted. Number 7, formation of the district must be approved ultimately by a majority of votes cast by the owners of the land and qualified electors voting at an election. Landowners may vote if they are qualified electors of the state, executors, guardians, corporations, partnerships, or trust. Each landowner votes a number of votes equal to the number of acres or portions of acres owned by that owner, rounded up to the nearest fifth of an acre. So it's a landowner vote based on acreage, ultimately, as we go through this process together. Anyone who objected to the formation and is not satisfied with the result has an opportunity to file special action with the Court of Appeals contesting formation. See how it gets sticky? If approved by a majority of votes cast by the landowners voting at the election and not overturned by the court, the district will be formed. Thereafter, changes in the district boundaries or the general plan will require notice and public hearing. That's my non-lawyer summary that Michael Cafizo prepared for you that kind of shows you how these things work when we don't have everybody together, at least initially. So with that, Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your patience. I want to thank staff. We've spent hours and hours on this the last month. They've been great, asked great questions, and with that, I'm glad to answer any questions that anybody might
Are there
have.
any questions from council?
I do have a question.
Councilman
Yeah.
Ray?
And I read it somewhere in the materials. I guess the terms that we just went over, I guess are prompting this question. I read somewhere in the materials that some of the cities we were looking at had more of a 25% thing, but you just mentioned the majority, right? So 50% plus one or whatever. And that's based on, acreage or the votes are based on acreage,
Yeah.
right? So percentage wise. Okay, so it's not 25%. It's 50%.
Was I talking about, I think when I said the majority of the cities, I meant the equity participation in the infrastructure at 25 cents for every dollar.
Right. No, I was just talking about the presentation you gave earlier. Somewhere in the documentation, it suggested that perhaps 25% was required to form a district or to, I guess, commit to, these.
So Mark, to submit the application to form is 25%.
Yeah.
To actually create the CFD requires 51%.
Yeah, based on
Okay.
acreage, yeah.
To commit to financing a public infrastructure, is that 50% plus one, or is that the 25? Sorry, I'm just a little bit, just trying to clarify. That's 50.
We got to have the 50.
Okay.
The 50 plus one based on acreage, I think, and then you're
Right.
open for business and off you go. If they file a court case, as I just summarized, and all that kind of goes away or things get stalled.
Okay.
Does that make
That's
sense?
what, the way I understood it, but
Yeah.
I think I got in my own head.
I think that's how-
That presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, is that, a standard, provision in these types of,
Yes,
things?
Yes.
50%
yeah, that's statutory
plus one.
requirement.
Okay.
Other questions? Councilman?
Manager Foggen, I know you had sent an email out with some concerns that Vice Mayor Lingenfelter had brought up about this. Were those addressed in this and made changes? Or I was trying to compare back and forth and I didn't see, but
Yeah, so I know that there is at least, excuse me, on one of those items, there is a language correction to the policy
okay,
that is needed. The other pieces that were part of that question, I believe Mark was prepared to answer. We're actually, of course, most of the things that Vice Mayor Lingenfelter were asking are on the legal side and not as much on the finance side. And so having our attorney that we've been talking to not present limits our ability to answer that question other than what his response to the Vice Mayor's questions were, which I don't know are clear enough for the Vice Mayor. I mean, maybe Vice Mayor could
I have comments.
weigh on that.
I'm just waiting.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is at least one language piece in there, and then the others are clarifications that the attorney has provided. But without him in person, and unless Mark is prepared to speak to them, I think we'd be hard pressed to answer them with 100% assurity.
okay.
Yeah, and Michael had sent an email, Ron, on that. I know you had emailed that to the council, right, on each one of those questions. And, I mean, we can go through those.
Yeah, since I have you here, I'd like to ask a couple of questions if I could.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you.
If I may read clause 2.10, ownership interests, it says, "The identity and address of all persons and entities with any interest in the property, including lien holders and purchasers under pending sales contracts, and the names and addresses of any qualified electors located within the proposed boundaries of the CFD, a current title report, and certificate from it says Maricopa County, but I assume that it should be City of Kingman or Mojave County, shall be submitted as evidence of names or persons with any interest in the land and qualified electors. And then if I go to, I have a problem with the title report requirement of that. If you go to paragraph 2.6, it says petition. The completed application shall include a petition in favor of creating the CFD. A petition must include a list of all parcels in the proposed CFD, along with the parcel number, the owner's names, the site, the address, the lot size for each individual parcel. And then the statutes, you look at the statutes, 48, 701, 12, they define owner as the person or entity that on the day of the action, election, or proceeding is begun or held, appears to be the owner of the real property as shown on the property tax assessment roll. So I guess my question, a long-winded way to say it, is I think most, or I would guess that most CFDs that have been created don't have over 100 people with a land interest in a proposed CFD. It's like a one developer that's going to do a master plan community or something, right? That's a lot of them. And so my concern is if you do have a proposed CFD with, say, 100 or 110 possible landowners and you request title reports on all of those people, I asked our engineer said a full-blown title report costs an estimate, right? Range of magnitude estimate, $300. So you're looking at a $30,000 to $33,000 expense, and all the statute says is appears to be the owner of the real property as shown on the property tax roll. So I don't think that all those those tax lien or reports are going to give you any more information that you would get. I mean, you could just look at the free property tax assessment roll and get that same information and save your applicant like $30,000 to $33,000. That's one concern.
Sure.
And if we don't get rid of that, I guess my second question is that an expense that would, when the district is able to do so, reimburse the applicant? Because that is it's a district expense. My other, just for purpose of clarity, and I emailed you this, Manager Foggin, but in paragraphs 2.21, 4.1, and 4.3, I can read those off, but just to save time, that certain costs are defined as the responsibility of the applicant, and while those funds may initially come from the applicant, after the formation of the district, those are, or should be defined as costs of the district and not the applicant. They should be reimbursed when the district is able to do that.
Yeah.
And then I had one question for you, and it's on paragraph 3.2. You can just go there real quick. The last sentence of 3.2, it says, such costs as they relate to but exceed the cost of formation shall be used for administrative costs. I've read that sentence like at least 50 times. I don't understand it. I don't know what it's talking about. Do we need that sentence? Or if we don't, can we just delete it?
Okay,
That's all I have.
on 3.2, okay. Yeah, so in here, let me find this for you real quick here. On the application, when they submit that, they write us a check for 15 grand, as you guys know. And those costs will be primarily for staff time.
Right.
And staff would take very copious notes, kind of like being a lawyer, where you keep track of your time every 15 minutes, you know, what have you. And
Yeah.
then engineers, public works, city manager, finance
No,
director.
I get it. Wouldn't it be easier to just delete that last sentence and say that if the city needs more money from the applicant, that they'll request more money, and then if they don't use the full $15,000, that they'll refund the balance to the applicant? Because I don't
I
understand.
mean, I
the
think
last
that's probably fine. I think we have another, you're probably gonna burn through the 15,000
Right.
relatively fast, right?
It just seems like
And
less bureaucratic and an easier way to say it,
Yeah.
to say, we're gonna ask for 15,000 first. If we burn through that, we're gonna ask you for more. And if we don't use it all, we're gonna
Yeah.
reimburse the balance.
And just real quick on that, I'm looking for the statute. Tina found it earlier. There's pages. Go ahead, Tina. Which page? Oh, it's in here. Okay, so on page, real quick, okay, so on 20, this is out of the statute that Michael does. So fees and other charges assessed in connection with submission and consideration of the application cannot exceed 15.
Okay,
If the application is denied, no fee or charge may be assessed in connection with substantially similar applications submitted within 1 year. So we're not gonna double dip. If we were to deny it and they would come back, then we wouldn't charge them twice, right?
okay,
Fees and other charges paid before formation that exceed actual costs of forming shall be used to support formation or administration, including issuance and sale of bonds. So if we don't burn through the 15,000, we can apply it towards the issuance costs to save the developer that money.
okay. that
To me,
makes
that's
sense to
pretty
me.
reasonable.
That makes sense to me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay? And on that, just real quick, and you know, the city's, I mean, I know your city's very reasonable from what I can tell. I do think that we have the ability in here after formation, and we have it in our policy, to ask for additional monies from the developer if the city deems that necessary.
Yeah.
So that's just for flexibility.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, and the last thing I would say is just to go back to 2.10.
Okay?
I just think it seems easier to revise that language to say, ownership costs, the identity and address of all persons or entities who are owners of property within the proposed district as reflected on the county's property tax roll. That's consistent with statute, and I just don't understand why we're trying to make the applicant spend so much more
Okay.
money to not get any really additional.
So here's my
information.
understanding of that, so we hear you,
Sure.
we don't want people running around getting title reports and paying lots of money.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. When you have one
Yeah.
master plan developer,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But when you're looking at maybe over 110 people that have an ownership
Right.
interest, and you gotta do 110 title reports at $300 a pop, that's a lot.
So I think what will be permissible by Michael, we'll double check this, is just for the application for formation where we get all the data. If we get at least 25%, the top 25 or maybe the top 50, and that may be one landowner,
Yeah.
right? I don't know yet.
Yeah, could be.
Then all we need is the title report in connection therewith for the application. Make sense?
Makes sense.
And then as we move forward together and determine who's gonna be part of the district, then I think we have to have title reports as a condition of selling the bonds and getting permission
Yeah.
from the lien holders and
Right.
all that. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think, Ron, we'll double check with Michael, and I think.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is that this really becomes, important, not for the application, but for the actual pulling the trigger of the CFD, in that anybody that has, rights to that property needs to be they need to know and they need to be identified so that they can get the information that there's gonna be a lien against that property, and it's a senior lien. In talking with the attorney this morning, that was part of what he was talking to us about. Again, I would be much more comfortable changing the language with the attorney in person giving you
Sure.
that, because I don't even play one on TV.
Okay, well, if it can't be simplified, if it can't, I mean, because the language I submitted does comply with the statute, but if it can't be
Right.
changed for some reason, then I guess the next thing I would ask is that, again, that's a district expense, or that should be a
Right.
district expense, and when the district would be able to, that it would be reimbursed to.
And the one
yeah.
thing that we do understand is in the formation and the push forward on the CFD, that this can be defined in the development agreement as part of the CFD.
Okay.
So recovering of expenditures
Yeah.
in that process can definitely be called out. And that's one thing that we did talk about on several of those questions that you had. Good questions.
Okay.
And yes, the CFD generated revenue can be used to repay expenses of forming it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you both.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Allison?
I was just, I think $300 for a title search is very high. I'm just because we do them at work. But also, the only liens that we would see doing research at the county would be a property tax lien. So there's all kinds of other liens that a title search would be necessary.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Look forward to working with you. Appreciate it.
So we have a staff approval. I think we're not quite ready.
Are you ready for a motion?
Okay. Yes, we are, we have staff recommendation that we approve Resolution 5205, adopting policy guidelines and application procedures for the establishment of community facilities district. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, there was one person, I believe, that signed up.
You are right. Boy, tonight is,
Oops.
I'm pushing too hard. We do have a person signed up to speak on this issue. John Timko. So sorry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to take a minute to congratulate staff and Stifel on putting together a very good procedure. I'm John Timko. I was former finance director for Mojave County from 2002 to 2016 and wrote the county's CFD procedures and in fact went through those procedures on 3 occasions to actually form 3 CFDs in the county. None of them actually went forward to the point of issuing debt, but we did go through all the necessary steps to form the CFD, so I'm kind of familiar with them. My only concern with the policies, and Travis did a good job of bringing that up, is 2.10, request information that is absolutely going to be necessary at the time the CFD tries to issue debt, but I don't think it's necessary to the application process. The application process is essentially there for you to make a decision whether the acquisition of this infrastructure through a CFD provides a public benefit. The people who own the property in the district are the ones who decide whether or not to form the district. If they choose to assess themselves that cost by vote, then that's their decision. And at the early stage, your decision is whether the applicant has the ability to deliver what he needs to deliver, and whether a public benefit would be served. And so you don't really need every single landowner to tell you who their mortgage is with and how much they owe to make that determination. That clearly is something that has to be done during the process at the time that a decision is made to issue debt, but I don't think that 2.10 is information that's necessary in the application process. Once the district is formed, then that will follow. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Timko. I think that has been established. And now moving to motion, I would entertain a motion regarding this issue.
Mayor, I'd like to actually motion that we table this for at least a 2-week time frame. There are 3 of us that are brand new on this, and see, this is the first time we've heard anything about it. We received the agenda after 5 on Friday, so we've had a short amount of time to really delve into it. I'm not asking to permanently end it, that's not at all, but I would like to have a little more background on my shoulders before I make a decision today. It's just simply an ask.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments?
Well, Mayor, there is some concern. I know even Manager Foggen brought up the fact that it would be, and I know Vice Mayor too, I think maybe you might be more comfortable with the attorney here. I don't know. I'm sort of trying to get a feel for that. It seems like there is some issue about verbiage. So that being the case, maybe it might be wise to, I don't know.
Well, I don't think any of us.
We need to
the
stop
attorney's gonna be
for
here.
just a second. If Councilwoman Nelson made a motion, then we need a second, and then you can have discussion.
Well, I didn't hear a motion.
Okay, I just.
I made a request.
That was a
Okay,
request,
okay,
and I
great.
thought we were
Just wanna
having
make sure.
preliminary
Yep.
discussion before a motion, is what it sounded like to me. Thank you, manager.
What I would say is, yeah, I don't think any of us knew that the attorney wasn't gonna be here tonight. So, as far as language is concerned, I'd like to see if he would be amenable, the attorney, to revise paragraph 2.10, just to say that the identity and address of all persons or entities who are owners of the property within the proposed district as reflected on the county's property tax roll, just for the purposes of the application. You know, once you go out to do financing, that's a different ballgame altogether. And then clarification on the last paragraph or the last sentence of paragraph 3.2. And then clarify that paragraphs 2.21, 4.1, and 4.3, clarify those to reflect that those costs are the costs of the district after formation. So if you can take care of that in a two-week period.
Yeah, and again, like I said, we would have liked to have had these be answered tonight, but with a family emergency, the attorney wasn't able to attend. So either we'll get that in writing, or we will invite the attorney to our next meeting to provide clarification. Again, we apologize for getting the agenda to you late Friday. We were actually waiting for these documents that we were talking about. So, again, no problem waiting till the next meeting to have those, that information. And we'll obviously work to get those answered quicker, but to have the attorney here to speak to 2.1 and any other items. As Carl and I were over here, there's a couple of typos that we can clean up as well. So totally can bring that back in a couple weeks.
Counselor Scott, Staley has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify, Mr. Foggin, with you. What this item is just to adopt a policy, correct? This would be used anytime in the future for any facilities district. This is not specifically to approve the Rancho Santa Fe Facilities District, is that right? Right. Okay, and it was just that the city has never established a policy, and that's what we're doing today. And can that policy be amended down the road? Yes.
Yep.
So if we didn't like something in there, we could go back and tweak it later?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to thank staff also for the hard work that's been put on this. I know it's been months of really digging deep and working with our experts to create this document, so truly appreciate it.
And Mayor, could I make
Yes.
just one comment? If you want to
Yes.
push it on down to another meeting, can we just not, for flexibility's sake, can we not say the next meeting just because there may be scheduling conflicts with the consultants coming back up? That's my only concern, that they may not be available at the next meeting.
Could they be on the phone?
That's, again, I can't make those guarantees.
You know, if we do that, we can always amend our schedule too. I mean, if we did call for it at the next meeting, I guess we could postpone
I
it.
think the intent is for sure to get it at the
Yeah.
next meeting, but
Exactly.
I just always hate those deadlines because we're not always able to meet them.
We all hate deadlines, man.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion if I could, to bring this issue, this policy back in 2 weeks after the attorney has an opportunity to look at reviewing and possibly revising paragraph 2.10, reviewing paragraph 3.2, the last sentence, and clarifying paragraphs 2.21, 4.1, and 4.3, that those are district expenses.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I would second it conditional, and we're probably looking at 3 weeks.
That's what
And
we
that's
were
the
just checking.
verbiage instead of 2 weeks, but in other words, attempt for the next city council meeting. But
Got it.
depending on schedule changes.
I revised the motion to say bring it back within no later than 3 weeks' time. Is that accurate?
As long as that's the next city council meeting.
Right.
That covers
Okay,
city council?
do I have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to bring this policy back at the next city council meeting with the enhancements and revisions as discussed. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay, now, if I read my agenda correctly, we will move on to department reports and the 2019 Kingman Street Drags.
Mayor,
Chief
Council,
Cooper.
thank you. I've been asked to give you guys an update on what we're doing so far with the 2019 66 Kingman Street Drags. We've been meeting with this group, city staff has, monthly beginning in October, and the event is scheduled for October 25th, 26th, and 27th. And wanted to let you know what the plans are. There's going to be a significant closure. The street drag is scheduled to take place on Route 66. I have an overhead slide that I'll show you. Basically in front of from the police department all the way down to Fairgrounds, where Fairgrounds intersects with Annie Devine Avenue. And they're expecting over 15,000 spectators, and they're expecting over 300 participants. It's promising to be, according to their group and that culture, to be very, very successful and very attractive. Here's an overview of the proposed shutdown. If you can see roughly, this is the police department. I'm looking at this screen. And Lewis Kingman Park, and then we have Fairgrounds that intersects, and that's going to be a significant closure. We've been working very closely with DPS, Street Department, ADOT as well. They're working through the traffic control plan. That's going to be very doable. We're not worried about it. It's just a lot of moving pieces, but that's where the closure is going to take place. The event time frame, again, the event itself is on October 25th, 26th, and 27th. But you're going to see closures and restrictions happening the week before the event, and you're going to see those closures and restrictions be removed the week after the event. So it's within 2 weeks, but we're guessing it's going to be about a week and a half of significant impact to traffic. But we do have a plan in place. We have been in the process with permits. We've been working very closely with the leadership of the group. They are not here tonight. Their leader is sick, and he apologizes. I called him. He was wanting to be here in case you had any questions for him. But we have been working through the process and obtaining permits through the city, through ADOT, and we are holding meetings every week with this group, and they're very eager to cooperate with us. We've done this before. If you're familiar, we had a street drag downtown on Beale Street. That was very successful. It was very crowded, very congested. This is much better suited for everybody involved, so we're excited about that. They have a traffic control plan. It is being approved. We're working with that. They have a reputable company that's organizing it. And again, we are working very closely with the Department of Public Safety, the Sheriff's Office. All the city departments are in these meetings every month. We're scheduled to have one soon, and we're excited about it. We are part of the permit process. We're going to require them to have security. We're also going to ask them to fund our officers, which is going to be a sergeant and 3 officers, for the safety. They're expecting 15,000, and all reports it could be exceeding that. So, any questions?
Any questions?
Can you announce the date again?
October 25th, 26th, 27th. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mayor, may I?
Yes.
This is really exciting. This group has really stepped up. They're really working very hard to make this a large, an incredible event for Kingman. The organizer is battling cancer, so that's one of the reasons he's not here. But they have stepped up in every sense of the word, and they're doing everything in their power to make it a great thing for Kingman. I'm excited.
Thank you. Does sound very exciting. Okay, any other comments? Thank you so much. We look forward to it. And October will be here before we know it. I believe it. Okay, the next item, announcements by mayor, council members, city manager. Manager Foggin, can we start with you?
I currently have no announcements, Mayor.
All right. Councilor Watkins?
I have nothing, Mayor.
I just have the airport authority, the airport commission meeting that I attended, and wanted to let everybody know the 1-year anniversary is coming up on May 3rd. It will be a year since we've had the airport and industrial park, and I believe that Gary Kellogg is putting together a presentation for us, a little overview of all the successes that we've had in just one short year. I don't want to take anything away from his report, but it is quite a list, and we should all be very proud of the work that city staff has done to really improve our airport and our industrial park, and there's a lot of exciting things coming in the future. So that's it.
Thank you.
This morning, I attended the Arizona Association for Economic Development's Northern Symposium. It was held in Prescott Valley. Mayor Miles was unable to attend, so I went in her place. It was very well attended. I was a speaker on a panel of mayors. They had Prescott Valley there, and Globe was there. Myself and then one other gentleman from Chino Valley. So it was a great event. Had a good time talking about all the things we're doing with our tourism, all the things we're doing in our traded sector, which is our industry. And I played a little game with them. I went down and got a T-shirt that was branded for Kingman, and I asked people, how many acres do you think the Kingman Airport Industrial Park is? How many acres do you think it is? And it was really interesting to hear, these people from Phoenix and all these other areas take guesses, and I heard 200 or 300, and the largest was 1,000. And so when I told them that our airport and industrial park was 4,000 acres, their jaws kind of dropped to the ground. Comparatively speaking, Sky Harbor is only 3,400 acres, so some good things ahead of Kingman, I think so.
Thank you. And I'll just report that last Friday, Greg Henry and I, the city engineer, and I went to Flagstaff. We spoke before the ADOT Transportation Board and asked that they reconsider and put Rancho Santa Fe on the their 5-year plan. And we pointed out numerous things that probably have been said in here many times, but it is 95% designed and engineered. It isn't an opportunity zone. The rights-of-way have been pledged by the landowners. The partners are all at the table, and there's been significant investment in this project by ADOT, over $2 million, and by the city of Kingman. We're in an opportunity zone. There are probably several other things mentioned, but we asked them to demonstrate their commitment to I-11 and to honor their commitment to Rancho, which started in 2005 with their letters of commitment, and to put this on their 5-year plan. So I don't know if we will prevail in this, but as I mentioned to others, I think that we have shown that the city and everyone associated with this project has given it their very best every step of the way, and we will continue to do so.
Madam Mayor, if I may add on that point, I should have mentioned it before, but the city's economic development director last night, when he was going back to his home from the industrial park, Bennett Bradley, he runs the park out there for us. He was in a car accident on that road, which we have demonstrated has at least 3 times the crash rate. So dangerous, that stretch of roadway, and totaled his truck, but he was okay, and has to go out and get a new truck. But it's just point in case why we need another access point into that
Thank you
area.
for mentioning that, because we did emphasize the public safety issue very strongly, especially after the snowstorm we had with the accidents that closed off the park, shut down businesses, and people could not get in and out, much less emergency responders if they were needed. And the point was made, do we really have to wait for a catastrophe to happen in order for this to garner the attention that it deserves? And I hope not. So thank you for sharing that. Now we'll move on to council requests for future work session agenda items and or calendar adjustments. Do we have any requests? I see heads nodding no, so I have none either at this point. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.